There we go. Okay, sound check. Can anyone hear me? Breaker 19, Breaker 19. Okay. Thank you, Gold Panner. Oh, well, Jim is monitoring from his house today. He's got the sniffles and stuff. And so he is he's watching so he can answer in a limited manner. He's got a big complex answer. He could always call me and I could just repeat whatever he says over the phone. And yeah, he's not doing too bad. He just thought it would be better to stay at home. Oh, so shouldn't be too bad. Oh, well, as you all have seen by the videos this week, the smelting is going annoyingly. We're getting consistent beads. I mean, in terms of there's always a bead there at least. Hey, Adam. But the amount is varying and stuff. And one of the annoying things about this is I have to, go out there to the ranch and then sit there and wait while the furnace does its thing. And there's not a heck of a lot else to do. So it gets really tedious. And it can get somewhat cold. Right now it's freezing, so it's not that bad. But depending upon the temperature and stuff, it can be somewhat difficult just to stay warm. So we shall see what we shall see in terms of how fast I can get this done. I suspect we'll have a breakthrough somewhere, and then we'll be able to make it happen. Let's see if Lawrence Hiddle has. No, he says he has done some resin assaying in the past, but I asked for what size sample and what the cost and everything, and he hasn't answered that yet. So I don't know, but we'll probably send a sample off to the assay lab, because one thing we really don't know for sure is exactly how much gold is in this resin. We have a calculated value, and as Chris can tell you, I think it was yesterday when we were going over the variables and this and that and the other, we really have a fairly large error bar in terms of where it could be. I suspect that a lot of the errors will tend to cancel out, but honestly, I think you would have to say that 11% estimation and do a, honestly say, I don't know for sure exactly what it is. So it makes it really hard to tell how well I'm achieving an extraction if I don't really know what 100% would look like for sure. So say once we get enough information from Lawrence, we'll probably send some off there just to get a solid number. And that will give us a good idea. I mean, with all the error bars we have, if they were aligned in the right way, we might be doing pretty good right now. And we just don't know it. So such is life. anyhow, the by the way, in terms of heating, the area I'm in, it's an area of roughly 20 by 30 feet with a 12-foot ceiling, no insulation, one metal wall, one metal roof on top of OSB, one wall OSB to the outside, and two walls OSB to inside. So the amount of heat that would be retained would be fairly modest. Now, we were considering things like putting a cable up and just hanging a plastic curtain wall in the area there to, allow it to warm up a little bit. No, I didn't, Chris. I've been busy. I had to go out, get some shopping done, and she wants to go to the gym 5 days a week at least. So get that done. Well, yeah, Robert, but I say, first of all, it's not my building. Secondly of all, it will warm up soon. And Firefox, I'm not sure. However, one of the tests I did 2 days ago, when I resmelted the slag from a previous test with additional soda ash, I got a 0.09 gram bead out of that. I also added some lead, but nevertheless, that's pretty close to 100% recovery for a full sample. Assuming that, and I don't have my notes with me, but I presume I got something out of the initial button. So that might have been near 100%. If it's in the slag, if that's what's happening as opposed to going up the exhaust, then we should be able to figure out how to recover it without too much trouble. If it's going out in the exhaust, preventing that may be a lot more problematic. Hi, Kodak and Jeff. So, yeah, Roberts, I've got a big propane heater, and I talked to the owner, and he says, "Yeah, do you know how much condensation you get when you run one of those in a building like that up here?" Hi, Terry. I say, so far, it's been okay. It's just boring as heck, you know? So it gets to, I mean, what was that? The heat profile Chris and I were working on today runs 20, 50, 60, 70, 75, almost an hour and a half to get up to temperature, checking various stuff. And we'll probably just set up a wood stove, Chris, for next winter. If we're still working in that spot, we got to clear some floor space and snatch a wood stove. There's plenty of wood around here, and those work actually quite efficiently around here. A wood stove is a good way of space heating, especially intermittently. Not bad. What is the ideal reaction rate? We do not know, Adam. That is one of the things. Yeah, I understand, John, but you ought to read this assay manual. It is technical. Okay. Yeah, Chris did some research and found out what controller that is and got a manual. Apparently, that's kind of like an off-the-shelf temperature controller. And then it's just installed in this particular furnace. And so there's a lot of things it can do that the manufacturer doesn't tell you about, possibly because the manufacturer may not know. I don't know. But anyhow, so say there's a number of things we can do. Um, I say they're just incredibly time consuming. It would be nice to be able to do that here. Um, I don't know. Chris will tell you in a second, Gold Panner. Um, and that would be nice, but I don't think the fire department would approve. Now, there's another potential option. Again, it depends on how hard it is for me to get this dialed in. We have a gentleman, I mentioned him a month or two ago. He met me out on the causeway there, and I'm just sitting there fishing, and all of a sudden some guy comes up and goes, "Keith Bowen, Hard Rock University." And I'm going, yeah, this guy named Lauren, and he lives in that general area there. And so anyhow, he has a shop in that area that's heated. And depending on the situation, we may, move some stuff over there. During the wintertime, his business is mainly outside stuff. And so he's not terribly busy. And it may be something that we can set up over there at his shop. I'll have a nice heated space to work, and it'll have cell phone coverage. It's got a TV, and we could be doing numerous things at the same time. For example, tomorrow afternoon, I'm planning on going over there and working on the spot test. Because again, I prefer not to use harsh chemicals here, and it's a nice, comfortable temperature over there. And he just seems to think that it would be great to get involved in all this stuff too. So he'll have a great time. I'll have a much better place to go. I'll have some company. It'll make things go faster. I say we may, depending on how things go and how the boss wants to do things, I may move the furnace over there and some stuff too. And do some experiments over there. It would be a lot more comfortable, kicking back on a couch, watching TV, yakking with someone while the furnace is doing its thing. Oh, man. Well, Heavy, if you want Eva to cut your hair and come on by, I'm sure she'd be happy to do it. Okay?
Oh yeah.
Yep. She said, okay, fine.
I got a set of clippers. You want a military haircut?
You want a military haircut? She knows how to do those. But anyhow, so I will be going over there tomorrow and probably Wednesday and doing a lot of wet chemical stuff. And hopefully we'll get the spot test checked out. Now, one thing I did do, I took the test paper I'm using for this is not the test paper I used 30 years ago. And so we have another test paper that fulfills the same purpose. John says he doesn't want it to look like mine. But anyhow.
Well, it won't look like yours.
Heavy Metal says fine. Just set up an appointment. Anyhow, so.
We'll work for food.
Lost my place here. Oh, goodness. Oh, lost my train of thought. So anyhow, the test paper I was using years ago was made by Kodak. Kodak doesn't even do film anymore. So this particular test paper, I wasn't even sure it would work. So I made up some diluted to 1/3 strength aqua regia and dissolved some of the gold that Coulter Young from Mining Magnets sent me. And so I have a sample of gold containing aqua regia and tested that on the paper, and it got a reaction. And that the reason I really like that is I know exactly what's in it, as opposed to the leach solution. No matter what I do to that leach solution, I don't know all the complexities of it. So this way I've got a very simple system. And tomorrow we'll try acidifying the leaching solution, extracting the gold into MIBK, and then transferring the gold into some very dilute chloronitric acid and seeing how that works on the test paper. So no, Roberts, he's feeling a bit sniffly. He's monitoring right now. So he is there. If you have a question for him or something, he will be able to answer it, as long as it's not too long. If it's real long, he could call me up and I could just repeat his words. Let's see, can I repeat words? I don't know. I think I'm a little better than Joe Biden, but I'm getting there, you know. So anyhow, we'll be doing that and seeing what we can do about that test and getting it running, and then compare a known standard solution to both the pregnant solution I had assayed and the pregnant solution I had removed the gold from, and therefore is a complex but barren solution. And hey, Thousand, how's it going? He's a gentleman from Austria there that we chatted, gosh, over a year ago and such. And I guess he's back, got some time again. So if you have any questions, Thousand, let me know. Okay, Chris, go ahead and I'm not Chris. Jim, go ahead and answer Roberts at your convenience. Hey, David. He's not wayward. He's just kicking back at home, sniffling. Well, thank you, Thousand. Glad you showed up. And this is kind of the way we do it here. I'll give a synopsis of what I've done over the week. Jim will give his synopsis. We'll answer questions and sometimes go into more depth on a particular subject. And quite often somebody will ask a question that'll take us off. Ask 1000, Kodak, because that's what he knows. So anyhow, that's kind of how we play the game here, and it can get real interesting at times. Other times it's not so much. Sometimes it's just a monologue here. All right, 1000. It was nice to hear from you too. But anyhow, so that's the plan for the next couple of days, is working on the spot test, trying to get it defined. We're also going to see whether or not the resin is relatively easily digested by an organic solvent, and see if we might be able to liberate the gold that way. Now, we're not very hopeful on that. The plastic that the resin is made out of is apparently fairly tough according to the specifications. And so I say we don't have a lot of hope, but we've got several solvents that we can try easily: gasoline, methyl ethyl ketone, methyl isobutyl ketone, and we'll try those, see if we get any kind of reaction at all. I'm also going to try just soaking some in aqua regia, because if we can get the gold to go into the aqua regia, then it would be pretty simple to precipitate it with sodium metabisulfite, which Lauren has plenty of. How much gold is in the pregnant solution? It's been running in the neighborhood of 15 parts per million normally. Although when I was first starting, it was up around 30 parts per million. because I'd just been kind of recycling it, and I was running it at a higher solution to solids ratio because I had very limited leaching capacity with just that cement mixer. So I got a much higher concentration. The pregnant solution I'm using for testing runs, I believe, 30.4 parts per million. I'd have to check the notes. But that's what we're going to be testing. And the quote unquote barren solution is less than 3 parts per million. So we should be able to see a pretty good variance between the two. And I don't think there's going to be too much of the other chemicals, the other dissolved minerals in the resin. That's an assumption, you know. So that's, one of those situations. Adam, I presume you're talking to me about the ore composition. It's got dolomite limestone and silica and iron oxide in roughly equal proportions in general. So that's kind of our ore at the present time. The gold is extremely small, 80% passing 2000 mesh. So it dissolves quite readily, but then we have to get it out of the solution. Way too fine for either flotation or gravity separation. So that's why we went to the leaching system. As I say, getting it into the solution seems to work pretty easily. Getting it into the resin seems to work pretty easily. Getting it out of the resin kind of sucks at the moment. But it should not be technologically that challenging. Okay? So that's where it's kind of annoying being so ignorant about fire assay and such that, I really don't even know the basics. I know the thumbnail theory of it. But I tell you what, that book, it gets complicated. And that is, it's difficult when you're trying to balance a lot of different things, there's acid components and basic components and oxidizing components and reducing components and all these sorts of things. And also, and what's very annoying to me in this particular book, and I understand why it's there, it was written like in the early 1900s, but when it has stuff like the furnace at a medium heat, okay, what the hell is a medium heat? Could you give me a number? Because in many cases, he does actually use numbers. It's always in centigrade, which is why Chris was suggesting I switch it over to centigrade. But, it's not that critical. I can do the conversions. 8,000, that was my beautiful wife, Eva, there. And she'll be coming on, what? When do you come on? 7:30, little one?
To do a report.
Okay. She usually comes on in about an hour with what we call the Tinfoil Hat Report, where she talks about government policy and economics and things like that. If you don't recognize the phrase, it comes from in the United States. They have a theory. Not a theory, but they have a meme of some guy who thinks that the U.S. government is sending thoughts to their heads with radio waves, so they put on a tinfoil hat to protect themselves from the government. So Tinfoil Hat Conspiracy is a humorous term for something kind of far out. So we just call it the Tinfoil Hat Report for fun.
It actually goes back over 100 years, Bear.
Really?
Yes.
Back to Tesla?
Yes.
Back
Very
to Tesla.
So. In fact, the first tinfoil hats were made specifically to try to gather energy waves to help enhance your intelligence.
I don't know if you guys heard that. She said that Back over 100 years ago, they made tinfoil hats to try and gather the energy waves to help your intelligence. Any little one, 1000's on right now. So when you're done there, if you could put your tinfoil hat on just to show him, he might not make it until the tinfoil hat report. He's probably like at what, 2 o'clock in the morning or something? Goodness. You know, he's over in Austria. It is wee hours of the morning right now.
Ah, Austria. That would be like
Yeah, he's the guy that invited us to go see the Roman stuff.
GMT +2, I believe.
But as I say, he was wanting us to come on over there sometime, and it would show us Roman ruins and stuff. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
So there's Eva's tinfoil hat. You may be tinfoil, but it's stylish. So anyhow, yeah, we'd love to come over sometime. Now is definitely not going to happen. Yeah, it's 2:30 in the morning there. I have, say right now, I've got some important stuff to complete here. I need to have all these projects done by the time the snow melts. Standing invitation, I'm sure, is what you meant to type there, 1,000. And so those have to take priority because we want these all done by the time the snow melts and we can get back to the mining and processing. Basically, getting the gold out of the resin is the only real process we need to complete the basic theory on. And then from there, I need to work on higher production. We should be able to mine with just two people, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 5 tons a week, depending upon the efficiency and a few other little things. And we cannot really process it that quickly right now in terms of the grinding circuit. So I'll probably be working on the milling to get a grinding circuit that can achieve that kind of throughput. Call it, 1 ton per day, 8-hour shift, something like that. And so that's our, these are things I really need to focus on and get accomplished by next spring. I also have a super secret project, which I'll let everyone know once we determine that it works out and determine whether or not we want to patent it. It should be a pretty simple patent, so we might be able to go for that one. That will help in the recovery, making it a lot simpler. It's not going to be quite as efficient as the big boys, but if it works, it'll be a lot simpler, which for people of our size production is a huge help. So I got plenty of stuff to do, and in a month I got to have a hernia operation, which will slow me down a little bit too. So, yeah, it's a busy winter over here, and so far it hasn't been too bitterly cold. Although we did have a couple weeks where it's like barely getting above zero. Last week it's been, getting above freezing. Not warm enough to melt off all the snow. So right now it's in that watch where you step thing. Yesterday when I was going out to the ranch, I was in 4-wheel drive and just driving up this grade to get over the ridge and down toward the ranch there. And I'm taking it nice and easy. And then every once in a while, the engine would pick up speed and the truck would just kind of go sideways a little bit. I have to back off the throttle some more. It was slippery, It, I say, it was really slippery. And it's just packed snow, getting wet in the day and then freezing up at night. My goodness, was that a slippery road. So anyhow, that's making life a little interesting, but not not too bad. But yeah, the snow has not all melted, that's for sure. And that creates some interesting road conditions at times. Uh, I have chains in the truck if I needed them, but to chain up is such a pain in the butt. The road, take care, Lido. Um, the road itself is not that hazardous. It's just a rural country road with very little traffic on it. So as long as I can, you know, maneuver reasonably well, uh, best not to chain up. It's just a lot of work for very little benefit. Besides, it's kind of interesting to learn how to deal with that stuff. I was only going, I don't know, 5 miles an hour, 7 miles an hour, something like that. And oh, okay, Lido. Um, so say it's interesting, but man, that's some slippery stuff. To open the gate to the ranch just to get through it. Walking around the truck to get to the side of the road there where it's nice and soft snow and you can get a good, yeah, that was tricky. You know, it is slippery as can be. I was driving a 8,500 pound 4-wheel drive ice skate, which was kind of interesting. But so far it hasn't been a problem. Um, and well, Lido, the mining part, you know, we've got that started and stuff. I think with 2 people, we could probably run 3 to 5 tons a week mining without a problem. The question is, how much can we process? That would depend on the size of the facility, and primarily right now, man, we need bigger tanks and a bigger mill. You know, milling capacity. Right now, my mill is only running about 100 pounds an hour, and that's just not enough. Um, we do have a Stutenroth 2 ton an hour mill, but it doesn't have classification, so we probably have to add a classification circuit to it. Either that or run some material through it and test the leaching ability of the various particle sizes and see whether that will be adequate or not. I say we'll worry about it. We got, gosh, I don't know, 3, 4, maybe 5 tons of material stockpiled at the ranch. I've got probably 2 tons or more crushed to about 1/4 inch minus, and the other stuff is in larger rocks that I hadn't even bothered trying to crush. I don't think we'll be done with this mine in 2 years. Okay. Hopefully, we'll be expanding into other um, zones in the one mine we're at. And I know there's other zones along that ridge that look very interesting. Um, so I think we're definitely going to be busy somewhere. There's a lot of mines around here, you know. So I'm not terribly worried about that. Uh, you certainly can. As a matter of fact, we have an old piece of farm equipment that has hydraulic stuff. And so the plan was simply to take off what it would normally run with that and use the engine and hydraulic pumps to run the big crusher they have. They have a big jaw crusher, probably a 10 by 16 or something like that. And the 2 ton an hour impact mill, you know. So that's kind of the idea. If we can design it, you know, get everything figured out and then design it, it would be self-propelled too. You know, you have your stuff sitting there on the machine, just drive it around. So that might work out pretty well. We shall have to see what we shall see. Um, Jim probably has a good idea. I think we should have enough horsepower to run those two crushers, don't you, Jim? And then probably a hydraulic powered, um, what do you call it, generator to provide, electrical power for pumps and things like that. I think that um, the power plant and the hydraulic pump should be, a good prime mover for everything we need in one unit. And then we'll have something that would be very, very mobile also. Um, the uh, jaw crusher is currently sitting on an old four-wheel trailer. I think it's a military chassis. Um, and we could, make something a little more permanent, put a feeder on it. I mean, an output conveyor, something like that. If you're talking direct electrowinning from the leach solution, Firefox, we tried a number of ways to do that and couldn't get it to work. There's just not enough conductivity in this solution to get the kind of current flow we need. And that, in terms of getting it out of the resin, we may be forced into an electrowinning situation there. We shall see. It's certainly theoretically quite plausible. They usually strip the resin by using a chemical methodology to reliberate the gold and then electroplate the gold out of solution. We're trying to avoid dealing with a lot of chemicals and steps and everything else, but sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. No, Lito, if you could get a good electrowinning setup, certainly the power would not be your most expensive thing. Say if you watch my last um, me smoking, could you bring it to the door, please? Uh, and my last video, I actually did a rough calculation, and just the smelting part of the operation looks like it would cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $40 per ounce of gold recovered by smelting from the resin. And then you're going to lose about another $13 an ounce in resin costs. So it's a reasonable approach to this. The advantage is if we can figure out how to do it fairly simply and easily, most people, they can get a furnace and do a smelt without too much trouble, as opposed to setting up an electrochemical system, et cetera. And then you're still generally going to take your electroplated gold and then smelt it down anyway. So I say that would, if you're already going to have your kiln or furnace, you might as well use that as the end if we can do it. So basically, that's where we are hoping to make it a fairly simple process. If that plus the super secret process I'm working on both work, yeah, it would be a fairly simple thing to get the gold out of solution and into doré. Actually, quite simple and straightforward. That's what we're trying to do so that for the micro scale miner, it becomes a very simple, easy system to use. So far, the smelting hasn't been simple and easy, but it may very well simply have to be, I haven't got the flux formula right, the heat profile right, both of them right, things like that. And if we can get that figured out and check the parameters, and if it turns out they're fairly forgiving once you get it in the right ballpark. That would be cool. I mean, I was quite encouraged by that one test I did where I resmelted the flux and got a 0.09 gram bead. And it's like, well, there's all the gold in that sample right there. So I'd say if it's winding up just in the flux and not being collected, we can probably fix that. If it's going up in the exhaust, now we got a bigger problem. So we shall see what we shall see. So I say that's our situation right now. And I just get the feeling that the smelting, we just haven't hit the right formula right. We're trying to bake a cake and we haven't figured out what the right recipe is. I suspect that once we get the right recipe, we can bake cakes pretty reliably, pretty simply. It shouldn't be, with any luck, it shouldn't be much more difficult than baking a cake. Yeah.
That's just crazy.
You can look up that in public records a lot of times, like the Bureau of Mines and Mineral Resources and stuff. And Adam, depends on what state you're at. Here in Montana, you can get a lot of that information. But say that's the goal. It's frustratingly slow progress, but we've gone from only getting a bead every third or fourth time to getting a bead every time. And hopefully, we'll figure it out. One thing that may be an issue is the solubility of the gold in the lead. And to check that out, I'm going to inquart some more silver in the next couple of samples. Prospector Tripp sent me some of the silver he precipitates as part of his refining process. And it's very fine foil and particle and stuff. So it'd be really good for inquarting. Not absolutely ideal, but damn good for what I need. So Kodak, I've got a lot of stuff in terms of flux mixes and theory and this and that and the textbook. The problem is the one thing that isn't there is a resin formula. Now by using his standard formula for determining the reducing power of various additives and such, we were able to get pretty good reduction of the litharge into metallic lead, but we weren't collecting all the gold. Now again, that may just be due to solubility. Lead, if you're looking at a regular assay and your material's running, I think 1 ounce per ton is like 1 part in 40,000. And what I'm running is like 4,000 parts in 40,000. The solubility can potentially be an issue. So by using silver as an additive, we can resolve that problem if needed. But I say we're working at things. This furnace has the capability of applying the heat in whatever way we need it, but there's so many possibilities, and it takes, say, like 2 hours to test one, that it gets a bit complicated. Once we get anything that's getting us a good, consistent, high rate of recovery, then we will start playing games, modifying parameters like the heat profile. We'll see how fast we can bring the temperature up without messing with it. It's still, yep, that gets good. Let's, do it again. Yep, still getting good. Okay, let's see if we can do that faster. That sort of thing. One thing I did notice by using the litharge instead of the potassium nitrate, we did not see smoke and flames coming out the exhaust vent on the electric kiln. So that is quite encouraging. It leads me to believe that we're not getting such a violent oxidation of the resin that it's going to be driving off the gold easily, but we'll see. Yeah, placer is a lot simpler, um, but I started in hard rock, so I enjoy it. You know, um, so that's the basic thing. Right now, we just need to find some recipe that works consistently at a high level of recovery. Then we'll start playing games with things and see what's important and what's not, and how to optimize it. I've still got well over 100 samples I can run. Hey, Walt, how's it going? And so that's kind of the challenge right now, is get that first one. And uh, Lawrence Hiddle says that he has assayed some resins before, and so he might be able to help us out too. And so say we shall see. I got the feeling once we figure it out, it's going to be fairly straightforward and reliable. But that's just an article of faith at this point. I'm getting some damn good recoveries at times, and other times not, and I can't tell you why. But if I can get, roughly a 90, 100% recovery this time, and 60% that time, and 80% that time, and 90% this time, the assumption is if I can just figure out what's important, I should be able to get it fairly consistent. Um, the nice thing is this is not a complex substance like an ore would be. This is a resin that's loaded. So,
interesting. Very interesting.
I don't know what he was found interesting, but anyhow, so that's my thought. I say it's not a highly complex variable substance. So once we figure it out, what, little one?
I just discovered that Oscar Mayer has changed the formulation on their bologna.
And is this make a difference in taste or texture?
It makes a modest difference in taste. It makes a significant difference in nutrition, and it's a good indicator that shrinkflation is going on.
Ah,
It's stealthier
yep.
than usual.
Cheaper ingredients.
More fat, less meat.
So, anyhow, say that's why I
Always
think
assuming
what we're
it's meat
doing
in the
here.
first place.
I think it's the other way around, Roberts. How do you sample a quartz vein? 8 foot wide, 10 feet protruding out of a mountain. Well, the first thing, when you look at the quartz vein, is it all the same appearing material? It's quite often that the vein will have like a zoning. Instead of being one vein, it's actually multiple veins that were put in the same crack at different times, and they can have substantially different chemistry. So as you're looking at it, if you see different zonation, you want to sample each zone separately. You want to cut a channel across the zone to a consistent width and depth so that you're sampling everything equally in that zone. This can be challenging as the rock can vary in hardness and such. And so you're, chipping some stuff out and it comes out in a big chunk. Well, then you break that up, throw most of that away, and keep working on the harder material. So, and then once you get your samples, if you have the capacity to do so, crush it up and split it down. If not, most labs will, for a modest fee, accept a large sample and do the crushing and splitting, what they call sample prep themselves. And that, if you don't have the right equipment, it'll save you a lot of work. Trust me. But that's the general way you do it. And then you would sample it at different spots too. Your natural tendency is to high grade it. You look at the thing and you go, that's the best looking spot, and tend to go for that. That's not the best way to do it. That will give you, tend to skew it to the high side. You want average, or you want to get a number of samples across average looking material. It doesn't hurt to sample the high grade stuff, but make sure that you note this is high grade and it's apparently 20% of the vein, 10%, 50%, whatever. But notate, that this is not average and this makes up such and such a percentage roughly. 128 meters of 1.73 grams per ton. So that's about 0.05 ounces per ton oxidized ore. That is an okay heap leaching grade, very marginal for a tank leaching grade. For underground, that would not generally be good enough, Mr. Sharma. It's definitely an interesting intercept, but you'd pretty much have to open pit heap leach that to make good money off of it. If you were underground and tank leaching, your costs are going to be higher than your recovery in general. Sent you an email and text about a month ago, including pictures. Let's see. Sustaining membership, carry. Let's see. No, don't want that one. That's an interesting person there. I haven't heard from him in a long time. Okay, somebody else has a question. Donovan has a question about stuff. I'll have to write him a thing. Let me move that to my inbox. Hello, move to inbox. Activate charity guy from YouTube comments. Okay, so this I'll have to send to my inbox and look at later. And I don't see anything from you that I recognize, Walt. Let's see. A month ago, huh? Oh, goodness. And I didn't respond? I'm sorry about that. ES. Would that be you, Walt, ES? Because there's several there. Some I've responded to, some I have not. Kevin, that's not you, I know. And I understand that. Okay, let me go back to the other one and see what you said, Walt. Okay, Walt, thank you. Another drill hole, 0.19 gram per ton. Not very good. 10.88 grams per ton over 11 meters. Now that's interesting because that's a third of an ounce to the ton over 11 meters, 30 feet wide. That would be sufficient for underground mining. You definitely want to tank leach that. 30 parts per million gold in the pregnant solution. 1/10 of a gram per gallon. Could be. Let's see. I'll use my rough estimate there, Chris. So times, what did you say, 30 parts per million? Yeah, I would agree with that. About 1/10 of a gram per gallon. So that'd be, 15, $20 a gallon. Yep. So I don't know if there's other costs. If you're looking at the Eco Goldex cost and such, we're using about 6 times 3, 18. The Eco Goldex cost is about 10 cents a gallon. If that helps you with what you're doing. So, okay, Roberts. And so that, any other questions, Jeff? Does that answer what you were looking for? The Eco Goldex is quite inexpensive. We're looking at, I say, somewhere in the neighborhood of $10 or $20 per ton of ore processed. Is all. We actually consume about half of the Eco Goldex in solution in one run through the ore. So it's, quite economical if you got a good high grade ore, which we have a reasonably high grade ore. Our mining and transporting costs are going to be the biggest cost by far. The labor, the mining, ground support, transportation, which includes both fuel and driver. I'm not even sure which would be more expensive. Let's see, 50 cents times 2, let's call it $150 round. They'd be roughly the same. Your fuel and maintenance costs would be running about the same as your driver cost. So, that's hauling at a fair distance from where it's at to where we've got the mill set up. And so, all the numbers seem to be in a reasonable range if we can get the throughput up without increasing expenses too much. That's why we did an estimate using 2 people. And there was various ways of doing that. The least efficient way of doing it was to have 2 people together at all times. You mine stuff, and then you haul stuff and process stuff, and you always have 2 people. With the mill set up properly and everything, you should be able to have 2 guys set up at the mine, say Monday, and mine like gangbusters that day, load material on the truck. One guy hauls it to the mill while the other guy stays and continues mining. The guy mills it, gets it leaching and stuff, and then drives back to the mine the next day to pick up another load. And while he's gone, the stuff is leaching. So he comes back to the mill, dumps the already tank leach material onto the pad, grinds up another ton of rock, and then the next morning heads back to the mine, etc. So by doing that, you should be able to do about 3 tons a week without killing yourselves. Thank you, Walt. Let me take a quick look at it and see. Yep, there it is. So these are the pictures. It's hard to describe, folks. Well, it looks to me, Walt, like in picture one, towards the center, you have a highly brecciated zone broken up, and you have another one on the left side, the left upper corner. Those would be what are apparently high-grade pockets. Yeah, that's basically the same picture. Picture three, where you see all that iron staining, looks to be potentially a higher grade, but I don't see much textural difference. So as you're cutting your sample across that, pay close attention. If the freshly broken rock continues to look fairly consistent, you could just channel sample across that all the way. I wouldn't be too worried about that. That real red iron stain stuff looks to be fresh rock. That's something has just been knocked off of there, and there was a fracture line there that had a lot of iron in it. So you see a lot of iron, but it looks to me like it's probably a thin layer of iron. Okay. Does that help you out? Yeah, Jeff, but say I can process 100 gallons an hour with a $200 system holding 4 pounds of resin, 3 pounds of resin. What would it take to evaporate 100 gallons of water an hour? Plus, you don't wind up with just gold. You wind up with gold, Eco Goldex, etc. Now, how do you get it out of that concentrated mixture of chemicals? It is a chemical mess there. That's why you use the resin, so that it snatches it selectively. And now you've got all your gold in a small, simple system instead of a big, complex system. Just the energy costs are going to be enormous. Maybe Chris would like to do a quick calculation. How many gallons of gasoline, if converted to heat, would it take to evaporate 100 gallons of water? I'll go ahead and tell Mr. Sharma my email. Okay. In a small scale operation, you're correct, Goldstream. You might if it was placer and it was really easily recoverable and like that, Hey, Chris, say if you can do it fairly quickly, the energy of 100 takes to boil 100 gallons of water into vapor converted to gallons of gasoline. That's my question. I'm just kind of curious about that one, because I suspect it's going to be a pretty high number. Well, Adam, if you were running $3 to $22 per ton gold, and it's underground that you're going to have to mine, I think you pretty much have got all the numbers you need right there. It's not going to make it underground mining. Just the mining cost is going to kill you, because your underground mining cost is probably going to be running on the order, if you don't have to use ground support and it's pretty easy to mine and this and that and the other, you're probably running $40-50 a ton minimum just to mine it. So if you've only got $3 to $22 per ton in it, looks like no go. Now, if this was a gold mine, it might be the pockets that were paying. Does it look like they were taking out a lot of pockets? If not, they must have been mining for something else, or else they were driving along looking for something. Now, that's back in the old days, that's how they used to do it. They didn't have cheap and easy drilling or anything like that. They had labor. And so they'd actually drive a tunnel along the vein hoping to see some good stuff. If it didn't show up, oh well. Okay, well, let me take a look at the new email. I don't know if 1000 is still there, but if you are, this is the kind of thing we generally do. Picture 1 on email 2, that definitely looks like some mineralized quartz. The gray, on the other hand, indicates it may be something besides iron and therefore gold. It may have a lot of gold in it. No way to tell, but I'm looking at other minerals generally than iron there. Let's see. Picture 2 would be a classic case of what looks like a high-grade zone. See that dark gray zone in the middle of it? That looks much more heavily mineralized than the stuff on each side, so it should be sampled separately. Also, above the center, you've got the dark gray zone in the center, then some fairly clean quartz, then what looks like some really brecciated stuff above that. That stuff above it should also be sampled separately. Let's see what else we got. Picture 3, I don't see much in the way of different zonation. Might be able to just sample that all the way across. And picture 4, again, you can tell by the coloration where you see a lot more apparent mineralization than others, and you try and keep that separate. As a matter of fact, it looks like the vein itself is much more narrow there. It's all more heavily mineralized, and it looks like a granite on the right and left. And the vein has pinched off quite a bit there, is what it appears to be to me. Jeff, up here where it's fairly cold, the natural evaporation isn't that much. Yeah, a gram per ton in placer would be reasonable, yeah. Oh, well, if it was during the gold rush, Adam, you got to remember, gold was $20 an ounce. So $3 per ton was 0.15 ounces per ton. That's doable underground. And of course, 20 would be 1 ounce per ton, which is pretty good. You know? You have to calculate that. Okay, so Chris, how many gallons of gas per 100 gallons of water would that? Any idea? Yeah, you need to take more samples than 2. On 4,500 feet of drift, you need to take a number of samples and set them on an even spacing in general is the best way. Like every 100 feet, something like that. Take your samples and figure out how much is in them. Again, if that 100-foot mark just happens to put you in the middle of a nice high-grade pocket, make sure you note that. 1/10 of a gram. Let me see. See if I concur with that. We got about $1,800 divided by 31. Yeah, I would agree, Jeff. Good evening, Sin. So I say that's yeah. If those were gold rush days, yeah, that's good value for today. But two samples, 4,500 feet long, is just statistically nothing. You need to get a lot more samples than that. And then you look at the values you get for the samples. If somebody hadn't taken both whiteboards home, I'd have stuff I could actually write on behind me. But
I will make sure he buys his own whiteboard at Walmart.
but anyhow, so if you take, say, every 100 feet, so you got 45 samples, and all of the samples exceeded a tenth of an ounce to the ton, and the average was a half an ounce to the ton, then you could say, okay, look, it's going to be somewhere above a tenth of an ounce to the ton. Can I make money at a tenth of an ounce to the ton? If the answer is yes, then you're pretty darn safe, because no matter what you're doing, you're going to be making money or at least breaking even. And what are you sorry for, Jim? Oh, for the whiteboards? Yeah, you didn't know you were going to get a cold. And so that's something you look at. If you have a series of samples, say a tenth of an ounce, 2/10, a tenth, 2/10, a tenth, 2/10, 27 ounces per ton, kick out the one that says 27 ounces per ton. That one's anomalously high. It doesn't represent necessarily much tonnage. Make sure you note that, but that's not one you want to put in with your average, okay? Because it's just going to drive that average way high. If you can make money or break even on the lowest grade that you got to drive through, then you're pretty safe. If, on the other hand, you make a modest amount on the average grade and it fluctuates a lot, that gets a lot more potentially problematic, because it could be, we don't know. It's not very dangerous either way. And so when you're doing an arithmetic average, extreme numbers will drive the average out of the normal range. That's why they use things like mean, median, and mode. Median is the arithmetic average. Mode would be the most common number, and the mean is the value which half is above and half is below. But let's say you got to have more samples, and then you got to look at them with a careful eye not to let the occasional high grade sample skew the average and make you too optimistic. That's not the stuff you're going to be mining in most of the time. And the pocket of high grade, that may be really anomalous. You don't know. On the other hand, there's a number of mines where they mine in the low grade and pay the bills, and it's the high grade that makes the money, and so there you go. It's important to analyze those things. Let me see what Mr. Sharma sends here, if it's something I can look at. Okay, I'll do this kind of quick right here, Mr. Sharma. Strip ratio versus grade. Okay. Whenever you're mining, you're having to move waste, which is something you're not going to process. You get no valuable mineral out of it because it has too little to pay for the processing. and you have ore. Ore means you make money mining and processing it. The stripping ratio is the amount of waste to the amount of ore that you're moving. When you apply that to the grade of the ore, then you get, I forget the term, but basically the average grade moved sort of thing. And that's not a hugely useful number. You need to break it down a little bit tighter than that because it depends on how much the processing cost is versus how much the mining cost is. Your waste has a mining cost and a haulage cost. That's basically it. Your ore has a mining cost, a haulage cost, and a milling cost. So, and that's going to be more. In the case of the open pit heap leach mine I first started gold at, the mining cost about $1 a ton, and the milling cost about $6 a ton. So at the time, we wanted an average grade of about, 0.01 was our minimum cutoff, but about 0.02 is where we were basically breaking even, or roughly, or maybe it was $4 a ton was our milling cost. And it was a combined $5 a ton because our cutoff grade was 1/100th of an ounce per ton. We figured anything above, at that or above it, we would gain money by processing it. Below that, we would lose money processing it. And as a general rule, if you're breaking even and you don't have a bottleneck at the processing plant, it's better to process it because then you wind up with a higher total number recovered, which makes your stock look better. Okay. A lot of these mining companies, they're trying to keep a stock price in a particular range. So sometimes they will attempt to achieve a certain amount of production every month, even if it cuts their overall efficiency a little bit, or in some cases, I know a lot, which is stupid in the long run. You don't want to cut your haulage by 50% in order to get a little bit more ore on the heap that month. It's just stupid. Keep your haul running at 100% and then get all that extra ore next month and average it in. Don't worry about a month by month reporting. Do a 6-month reporting and do averages. And that way, it's a lot better for your production. You don't get, these stupid bottlenecks like I've seen happen. I'll try and look at some of the more detailed stuff on that in the next few days, Mr. Sharma, and see if I can give you more details. Boy, a lot of comments. That's an excellent question, John. Why did they quit mining those tunnels? Yep. Yeah, because they may have mined them out. It may have been the economics of the time. It could have been all kinds of things. I know mines in Mexico where they stopped mining because there was a revolution and they had to beat feet or get killed. It happens. Sometimes you'll have corporate issues, could be tax issues, could be management fights, things like that. Lawsuits that shut things down while they get resolved and it never gets started up again. And those sort of things. Let's see. I would agree with Chris. We do seem to have some sublimation of the snow going on right now.
Sublimation of the
Yeah, yeah. It seems to be getting less without you seeing much in the way of melt. Uh,
Okay. Whatever.
let's see. Sounds reasonable. Yeah, I mean, you can have a mine that's closed simply because the owner died and there was issues with the will, or the person who inherited didn't care about the mine and just let it go. You can have management issues. You could have a manager that was stealing stuff and he gets fired and the guy can't find anyone else that'll do the job right. A lot of mines were simply mining investors. They'd be moving dirt and this and that and the other. And boy, as soon as we get to here, or as soon as we get this done, we're going to be making money. But until then, we need to get money to keep going. And guess what? The managers were always getting their paychecks. So that's one of the things there.
Oh, Bear, you're such a cynic.
Have Eva write on your forehead. I think that means in lieu of a whiteboard. You just want to see Eva Goldstream. I know what's going on here.
I'd be happy to write on his forehead. You know, you can write on him with a Sharpie and it disappears after a couple of days. It's bizarre.
Yeah. Well, Adam, the key is, what can you do nowadays in terms of your costs and recoveries and things like that? In the technology, and mining has become very efficient in some ways. First of all, moving rock has become a lot cheaper with the advent of modern drilling rigs, explosives, and heavy equipment. You also have leaching technology, like open pit heap leaching made a huge difference in the gold mining industry. If you were using a tank leach, it was costing you $10 or $20 a ton minimum. If you were using a heap leach, it could cost just a couple of dollars a ton. So it made a big difference by using different technology. So you kind of have, and don't get taken in by the fact that just because the modern technology has a particular efficiency nowadays, doesn't mean it'll have that efficiency with that ore. I was once reading, I don't know, it might have been the Engineering and Mining Journal, or it could have been Mining Engineering, I forget which one. But a big mining company had put an ad in there. It says, if you can figure out how to process our ore profitably, we'll pay you $10 million. No joke. I mean, it was a full page ad. And what it was they had a very hard, non-porous quartz with silver in it that was fairly finely divided. So they had to crush it to like 400 mesh to get good exposure to leach it out or whatever. And that just really expensive. The grade wasn't super high, but it was in the range where, we can mine it if we could just figure out how to process it at a reasonable cost. And they were dead serious. They would pay you $10 million if you could find a way to process it and make a profit, because it was just that difficult an ore. So you cannot apply averages to individual ore bodies, or even necessarily different spots in individual ore bodies. It can vary quite a lot. So you have to look at just the rough numbers, the ore grade, throw in the average costs and everything, and then say, does that look plausible? Okay, if it does, then you have to go into more detail. If it doesn't look plausible even at that, then you're probably best just to not worry about it entirely, especially as a small miner. You need a good cushion as a small miner to make these things work. And there we got a situation where, in that particular case, it was really difficult. I knew one guy, he knew a really high grade gold deposit, but it had so much thallium that he put a sample in his pocket and went into tachycardia and almost died. How are you going to mine a rock that has so much toxic thallium in it? You can't even touch it for an extended period, or it can kill you. Not very helpful. Knew another guy, said he knew a pretty good gold mine, but they had left all the dynamite in the magazine when they left. So this dynamite's been sitting there like 50 years. There's like 3 tons of dynamite in the magazine, potentially extremely unstable. And he's like, I'm not going to tell anyone about that. I don't want their death on my hands. So there can be a lot of factors that will change the whole equation. What if it's in a wilderness area? You know, it doesn't matter how good it is. You're not going to be able to touch it. And so the routine mining and milling costs are used as your preliminary gate that the project has to get through. If it can't even achieve those numbers, if it doesn't make profit using those numbers, you can pretty much just not worry about it. Okay. On the other hand, if it does look reasonably profitable using those numbers, then you got to get into a lot more detail. What's your stripping ratio? What's the extraction percentage? What's your cost per ton to process? What various processes do you have? What is the extraction percentage of the process? These sort of things then become critical to making sure. As a micro miner, you want to have plenty of cushion. You want to say, okay, at my scale, I can mine at a cost of $100 a ton. I can process at a cost of $100 a ton, and I've got ore running $1,000 a ton. And me and one other guy can mine that and process that at a ton per day. So that'd be $800 that's $400 a day per person. Okay, that's a fair cushion. We need to look at this in more detail. Okay. So that's kind of how you do these calculations to determine whether or not a particular project looks plausible. Okay. And you don't want to look at it with rose-colored glasses. You don't want to take your best case scenarios and add them up together, because the chances of scoring a row of jackpots is pretty slim. Okay. If you've got to get lucky in 6 different things to make it happen, don't plan on that. Yep. So anyhow, that's basically the theory in general as to how you do it. Now, on a micro scale, you just have to have a good idea what it'll cost you to move it, extract it, meet all the permitting requirements, put it back to where the government will not be annoyed, and have plenty of cushion. And again, it's not just profit per ton. For example, if it costs you $10 a ton to mine and $10 a ton to process, but you can only do 1 ton a day, and it had $100 a ton, you'd only be making $80 a day. Well, do you want to work for $80 a day? It's not very good. You can go down to Walmart and make more than that. So these are the things you got to take a look. Now, I do have a economics calculator on the website I set up, and I forget what the address is now. It was on, what was it? what's the GoDaddy or what was
It was on GoDaddy. It's on Wix, but
it's on Wix right now, but I'm not sure how you'd look it up.
It's Wix site / I'd have to pull it up on the other computer, which isn't working right now.
Yeah, I say it's
like wixsite.com / Keith Bowen.
Let's see.
You may have pulled it up on your computer.
Keith Bowen.com. See if that Keith Bowen wedding DJ. There's a Keith Bowen. Ooh, he got a dark tan. That ain't me.
No, it would be wixsite.com.
I'm not disagreeing that. I just tried to see what happened. Man, apparently there's a lot of dark-skinned Keith Bowens out there. How about that?
Okay, Bear.
Patreon, Hard Rock University. Wow. I guess I got a thing on Patreon there. Wow, there's a lot more Keith Bowens than I knew about.
Yeah. I could have told you that.
She said wixsite.com. Keith Bowen bassoon.
Yeah,
Wow. Bassoon repairman. Wow. That's hilarious.
In a window there, type in the address bar, wixsite.com / Keith Bowen.
Wixsite, one word, .com / Keith Bowen, one word.
Yeah, it may come up if we've ever looked for it on that computer.
No,
we'd have to turn on the other computer and I can get you the address.
Anyhow, we can find that. We probably shouldn't have that on my set of sheets there, little one, if you can remember. Yeah. Okay. But anyhow, on that website, I do have a calculator that'll do all that stuff. You just punch in your numbers and it'll do the calculations for you. Could be, John, but let's say right now in Helena, you can go get a job, fast food. You know, are they still paying the sign-up bonuses?
I haven't seen sign-up bonuses.
I haven't seen
lately,
sign-up bonuses
you can
lately.
get a job as a shift leader at Hardee's at $18 an hour.
Shift leader at Hardee's, $18 an hour.
You can get a job at Winco for $13.50 an hour. It gives you a discount on your groceries and discounts on thousands of other businesses and really good insurance cheap. And stock options.
There you go. Exactly. $20 a ton would be great for placer if you have enough tonnage, because you can mine it and process it really cheap. So they say these are some of the things. Now I'm going to have to take a short break here. Sorry about that. Usually I'd have Minor Jim here, but he's under the weather.
Hi, everybody. He's taking a break, so you're stuck with me. Yeah, apparently Oscar Mayer is getting a little sketchy with their bologna. I took a look at the bologna because it did not look the way it used to. There were visible freckles of fat in it, and I'm like, okay, this is kind of weird. So I flipped it over and looked, and the protein content has gone down. Now, the ingredients still look the same. It starts, by the way, with mechanically separated chicken. You really don't want to know what that is. And second ingredient, pork. Third ingredient, corn syrup, which is why I don't eat this stuff very often. But yeah, it has changed slightly in texture. It has changed slightly in taste. And apparently they're using more fat and less meat.
You could have a bacon and tomato sandwich.
Oh, man, Mr. Sharma, Canadian real estate is just crazy. A lot of real estate here is just crazy, too, of course. But
let me get some more water here.
Roberts, I have had weird sleeping patterns in the past week. And yes, Chris, it's phony baloney. 100% phony baloney.
Oh, that's good.
But yes, I have had abnormal sleeping patterns this past week. I've also been having weird dreams. Well, let me put it this way, weirder than usual dreams. I may have to make myself a tinfoil hood for sleeping in. Anyway, I'll be back. Bye.
Oh,
Vegan baloney? Oh, no.
that's truly phony
No,
baloney.
no. I do not eat lab created foods, and I don't eat soy, and I stay far away from plant based oils and seed oils.
Yep.
No frankenfoods.
I have no idea, Roberts. It's above my pay grade.
What?
Chris would have an idea. 5G. They're killing us with 5G.
I don't know if they're killing us, but I do know my sleep patterns have gotten screwed.
Yes, I have no idea. My sleep patterns have been screwed up for years. Yeah, Eva and Chris together, when I was talking with Chris on the phone earlier today, they both slid a knife in my back. It was hilarious. Between the twixt of them, huh?
You know, it would. I'm sorry, but it was just so crazy.
Anyhow. So, I suppose I could blame my mental incapacity on 5G. I don't need 5G. I've already got a right parietal lesion, so that'll work. I've got my get out of stupid card already. Yeah, the price of real estate is really going up in the places like here. Yeah, I figured that, John. It's amazing that they couldn't figure out how to implement it properly here in the United States, but they managed it in Europe and everyone else. Well, Adam, I don't know if she's going to do a tinfoil hat. Everyone will have to, try and encourage her, I think. But there's certainly no lack of of subject for the tinfoil hat. Oh, anyhow. Yeah, Jim, I understand. I planned for this, though. You have to admit, I worked hard this fall to make sure I had plenty of ore stockpiled, plenty of pregnant solution stockpiled, and plenty of loaded resin stockpiled to do all the kind of testing that I may need to do so that I don't go batty before the snow melts. I haven't even gotten to the secondary list of stuff yet. And no, it's not shards of glass, just chunks of fat. It's not properly blendified. Find asteroids before they hit. But yeah, that's exactly why I was working so hard this fall. I was putting in a lot of time at the leach pad. And once I got that working, then time at the mine, gathering stuff, so that when this weather hit, I wouldn't be sitting there going crazy. And it's nice with Lauren's shop out there. I'll even have a comfortable place to work, and somebody to chat with. I mean, Eva's been a pretty good trooper, but to have her come out there to the ranch just to sit around in a chair freezing her buns off to keep me company doesn't seem to be appropriate, That might not be a bad idea, Goldstream, especially if you can convert it into something that's a little more portable and useful. Yeah. Well, I know they got lots of
Indian
Earth
baloney.
grazer asteroids.
Yuck.
So there's definitely going to be stuff. Adding to your harem, Keith? This is it.
He don't need no hair. He got me. I have more than enough personalities to keep him occupied.
So, it's tough to beat her with words. She's pretty good. So is Chris, that scumbag. Boy, he got me good earlier.
Yeah, I didn't hear what he said to you, but
Yeah, then you butted in, came at it from a different angle and slid your own knife in between my shoulder blades.
Gotta keep you on your toes, Bear.
Oh, yeah, I never really wanted to be average, Mr. Sharma. I never understood the motivation to try and be normal. I can empathize with the desire to be liked, respected, things like that, but not, well, he's just an average guy. Well, what the hell is that?
normal is highly overrated.
You know? So as I never really cared about that. And when I was a youngster, I was painfully shy, believe it or not. And I was a nerd. So socially, I was quite retarded, so to speak. But I don't know. I had a difficult time as a teenager and a young adult. It looks like we may have a tinfoil hat report here, guys. Is everybody ready? Oh.
Hello. Oh, minor gym camper prices are horrible. I've seen a few online that were just absolutely ridiculous. I'm looking at land prices, and they're absolutely ridiculous, of course. I mean, that's the world these days.
I'm thinking the bacon and tomato sandwich would be relatively low cal, huh?
Yep, bacon and tomato sandwiches are relatively low calorie. So, a Minnesota court apparently ordered the review of a water permit for the Polymet mine. There's been a lot of interesting things going on lately in that part of the country in terms of mining. We're seeing more state governments stepping in and trying to tightly regulate or stop mines from operating. And of course, the environmental groups are pulling their usual, lawsuit jihad to keep a lot of projects shut down. The Minnesota Court of Appeals on Monday ordered state regulators to reconsider a wastewater permit that was granted to Polymet Mining Corporation to build an open-pit copper mine, though judges rejected 6 other challenges to the permit from environmentalists. The appeals court ordered the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency to reconsider whether any groundwater runoff from the proposed mine would pollute navigable waterways. The decision does not cancel the permit, but it does further delay the timeline for when construction could begin on the $1 billion project at a time when the United States is trying to boost production of copper and other metals needed for electric vehicles. Polymet received a state permit to discharge water from its proposed mine site about 200 miles north of Minneapolis in late 2018. Shortly after that, 3 environmental groups sued to challenge the permit. Wow, this is sounding a whole lot like Tucson, Arizona and Rosemont Copper right here. The case wound its way through the court system before Monday's ruling at the appeals court, which sits below the state Supreme Court. If the agency finds the mine would pollute waterways, it may fall under the jurisdiction of the Federal Clean Water Act, which would impose more regulatory oversight. There's no timeline for this latest round of review. The appeals court rejected 6 other challenges to the water permit, some of which centered on procedural questions. Both the company and the environmentalists claimed victory after the ruling. Shares of Polymet, which is controlled by the mining giant Glencore PLC, were up nearly 7%. For St. Paul, Minnesota-based Polymet, the mixed ruling holds promise a permit could eventually come. Sometime between now and the end of the world, the permit could eventually come. This will mean a little more process, but it gives us a clear roadmap to the reactivation of this permit. I think they're being a little optimistic here because we've got permit issues like this going on here in Montana and also in Arizona that have been going on decades now. Okay. So I think they're being a little optimistic here, said John Cherry, Polymet's chief executive. Polymet has said it believes it can develop the project in a way that protects the environment. For environmentalists, the order to reconsider the permit showed the court has concerns about Polymet's ability to operate the mine safely. We reject Polymet's argument that we need to destroy the environment in order to save the environment, said Chris Knopf of the Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness, a nonprofit conservation group.
Nonprofit.
The state's Department of Natural Resources is reconsidering 2 other permits needed for the project. Now, I'm going to be keeping somewhat of an eye on this, along with a few other projects like this in other states, because it has not escaped my attention that the various NGOs and environmental groups of different types have stepped up their lawsuit jihad of late against mining. It is rather interesting and certainly troubling to see that many of these lawsuits are often filed by environmental groups that actually have no direct connection to the state. In another interesting lawsuit that I saw this week that I haven't dug into the details yet, somewhere over there in the Pacific Northwest, the salmon population has filed a lawsuit because their civil rights are being violated by something to do with hydroelectric type
This is a smart salmon.
Yeah. We now have fish filing lawsuits. Go figure. This is a new and interesting angle that might prove to be quite bizarre. Of course, it wouldn't be the first bizarre thing I've seen in the legal world, but it is of interest. So we shall see what happens there. Lithium price hits ludicrous mode as battery metal extends a 400% gain.
The Pandora Papers. He wants an idea on that.
I have not had a chance to go through them in depth yet, but they certainly are interesting. Yeah. Interesting is one word. I have heard a few things from them. I've looked into a few things from them. And some things I think are probably just touching the tip of the iceberg. I have very, very little faith that they reveal everything. You know? Yeah. There's a lot going on when it comes to NATO and the whole Ukraine thing too. I do find it interesting. I really do, because apparently somebody from the State Department, one of their major talking heads today, was saying that he really couldn't understand anybody drawing parallels between the situation in Afghanistan vis-a-vis closing embassies and evacuating people, and the position in Ukraine. The State Department can't understand why anyone would think that there was any similarity between these two situations. Kind of makes me wonder about the intelligence quotient of the State Department as a whole. I'm assuming it's somewhere between underwear size and room temperature, but I'm really beginning to wonder there. Okay. They're a little bit bizarre over there at State, as if we didn't know that. So lithium prices are doing crazy things. Lithium prices are continuing their breakneck ascent in China, with surging electric vehicle sales underpinning a five-fold gain over the last year. Chinese lithium carbonate prices, tracked by Asian Metal, rose to a fresh record on Monday as data showed a 35% month-on-month jump in electric vehicle registrations in December. Nearly 400,000 electric vehicles were registered during the month, according to the China Automotive Technology and Research Center. Tesla supplied about 18% of the total. The sales figures offer the latest evidence that the electric vehicle revolution is now arriving in full force, fueling sharp gains in the shares of car makers and mining equities alike. Ganfeng Lithium Company, which signed a long-term supply deal with Tesla in November, said its profits for 2021 will be up as much as 437%, fueled by the fast development of the EV industry. But with lithium prices blowing past previous records, there's a growing risk that raw material inflation could soon create headwinds for the burgeoning industry. Bloomberg NEF predicts a 2% rise in battery pack prices this year, potentially pushing out at the point at which electric vehicles will reach cost parity with conventional cars to 2026, 2 years later than the earlier forecast. That whole cost parity thing, you might want to take a closer look at how they arrive at that, because the accounting in there is ludicrous, okay? They use accounting tricks that I have never seen before, and I've seen some really weird accounting because I read a lot of government websites. So, the parity between internal combustion and electric, it ain't. And it ain't in 2026, and it wouldn't have been in 2024. So, they're full of it. And despite the bumper profits on offer, many analysts see the lithium market moving into deeper deficits in the years ahead as producers struggle to bring new projects online. Last week, Serbia blocked plans for Rio Tinto's Hadar mine in a dramatic response to local opposition to the project that's set to pile more pressure on future supply. And speaking of pressure on future supply of things, that is going to be more of a problem here in the United States, because as usual, between our federal government, our various state governments, and various environmental, non-governmental organizations, at a time when we should be looking at beefing up our mining infrastructure in this country, once again, we are doing exactly the opposite. So if you're looking to invest in mining stocks, stick with mining stocks for companies that actually are based outside the U.S., because things are not going to go well here, at least not for the big guys. We little guys can slide under the radar still. The big guys, not so much, you know? Congress being ceremonial, well,
I've got a good idea why Russia wants the Ukraine.
I don't know whether ceremonial is the word I would use. Congress being a convenient set of front men for certain groups whose main place of residence happens to be K Street in Washington, D.C., that I think is getting somewhere. I don't necessarily trust Congress, because nobody in their right mind lasts more than one term in Congress, okay? You know?
Well, I think I know why Russia wants Ukraine.
If we really knew who our leaders are, we would be able to figure out where the hell we're going. That is an interesting point, because more and more it's looking like some of our leaders are the various tech oligarchs that are controlling a great deal of the information stream. This is something that a lot of people are ignoring. But then again, if we didn't ignore it, we might actually have to deal with it, and that would be very difficult. Gold rally defies traditional headwinds. Speaking of rallies, everybody may have noticed that at some point today, the stock market lost 1.5 zillion points. And then mysteriously and amazingly, just before the end of the day, there was a huge influx of buyers, and it finished up again. Zero Hedge has an article on this issue. It is for premium members, but it is well worth the premium to get the article. I didn't do it because right now Professor Hard Rock and I are spending all our excess money on food. But yeah, there were some interesting shenanigans just before closing on the stock market today.
I'll explain it when she's done, Roberts. Okay.
Actually, Professor Hard Rock, why don't you tell us about Ukraine here? I do believe it has something to do with warm water ports, doesn't it?
Partly, but also, I mean, they already have the Crimean Peninsula here. I've got a map up.
Yeah.
But they've already got the Crimean Peninsula. This is Russia here, little one.
Yeah, I know.
This is Ukraine. This is the Dnieper River here.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, as I zoom out, if Europe wanted to invade Russia,
yeah,
and they could stage here, notice there's nothing in the way.
Well, I could have told you that. That's why it was considered a central part of the early Russian Empire under both Peter and Catherine.
Yeah, because Ukraine is a giant plain, and by taking Ukraine, they push the border of the Russian Empire back to the mountains.
Yeah.
And so they have a natural barrier at their border. If you're a militaristic state and you're concerned about invasion, you want defensible borders. And Ukraine is the giant open gate on the southern part of the wall.
Yeah.
And so
it also has stabler weather. It has much better terrain for staging things than Belarus does.
Well, it also has a lot of agriculture too.
Mm-hmm.
So it provides a lot of positives for Russia.
It is a different sort of breadbasket than Poland, but Poland is a breadbasket as well. Yeah, Russia most definitely wants Ukraine. You may have heard that apparently our embassy staff in Kiev,
yeah.
Kiev has been told that it might be a good idea to start packing, and they might consider leaving. And the State Department, of course, put out a no travel order. They have no travel orders to most of the world that nobody pays attention to anyway. And we also heard that the current administration has no plans whatsoever to do anything about helping any United States citizens that decide to take trips that involve exiting Ukraine. This should not surprise anyone. After all, we still have people trapped in Afghanistan. Though luckily, non-government people operating on their own dime with their own resources did manage in the last couple of days to get another 23 Americans out of Afghanistan that wanted to leave months and months ago. So at least some people are coming home. And unlike the ones that the United States government supposedly bought home in their airlifts, these people have videos on social media. It's quite interesting, really. But then again, back to the gold. Gold rally defies traditional headwinds. Bank of America expects the gold price rally to persist despite a challenging macro backdrop.
No!
Gold continues trading above $1,800 per ounce despite the respective 10-year interest rates and dollar index rising from intra-year lows of minus 1.25 and 89.5 in 2021 to minus 0.54 and 95.7. The bank views the sustained price performance as remarkable since yields and the dollar tend to be the most critical price drivers of the yellow metal. Further supporting the gold price are investment flows, which have been very resilient, according to Bank of America analyst and lead author Michael Widmer. In the bank's Global Metals Weekly Report, he said gold had disconnected from its traditional drivers. Wow, it disconnected from its traditional drivers.
Well,
because of significant dislocations buried beneath the headline inflation, interest rates, and currency moves. These market forces raise the appeal for investors to hold gold in a portfolio. Widmer said inflation at 7% put the U.S. Fed in a difficult position, but cautioned that tighter monetary policy might not be the silver bullet to fix the problem. We'll get to that tighter monetary policy in a minute here. While some of the inflation is driven by domestic factors, others, including supply chain dislocations, are not. Also, a mix of temporary and more persistent drivers are at play. We also note the Fed's reaction function has changed. Gradual hikes, accompanied by declining inflation, steady economic growth, and stable markets, may be the ideal scenario for U.S. monetary policy, but this is a difficult path. The risk of a policy mistake is high, and the rising equity volatility tends to support perceived safe havens, gold included. The bank also observed policy normalization contributed to a nearly 50% drop in Bitcoin and crypto assets, which it did. Big time. Which is another factor likely to support robust gold inflows. Moreover, emerging market countries have been net gold buyers in recent years, particularly over concerns about how the shift away from the ultra loose money policy in DMs could impact their portfolios. While EM central banks allocate 6% of their portfolio to the yellow metal, owning around 12% would optimize the risk return profile. So EMs have significant scope for gold additions, particularly after the recent crypto fiasco in El Salvador. Gold is a hedge for investors and EM central banks alike. And this matters as global imbalances make a comeback, particularly when geopolitics are flaring up. The bank noted these global imbalances are rising, as was the VIX. So, apparently, the financial world is waiting with bated breath for the Fed to make their first of anywhere from 3 to 5 interest rates hikes. I believe it's coming on Wednesday or Tuesday. It's some day this week that it is happening. In the middle of all this, Professor Hardrock called my attention to the fact that the economic activity numbers are severely negative at the moment. They had been forecasting an economic activity number of like 0.44, and it's, what was it?
No, it went down from 0.44. They were predicting a 0.25, and it wound up to a negative 0.15.
Yeah, they were predicting a 0.25. It ended up at a negative 0.15, which is really, really interesting. And so when I went looking through all the various Fed and Treasury websites to see if I could get some numbers on the actual economic volatility going on out there, well, it kind of seems to have gone poof and disappeared the same way the M0, M1, and M2 have disappeared from good old Fred. So, I don't know if anybody else has noticed this, but whenever stuff mysteriously gets archived as no longer being relevant on a federal website, that usually means bad news for those of us who live in the real world. So I'm going to have to start digging deeper and see if maybe, just maybe, those numbers are still out there somewhere, just someplace where nobody is supposed to find them, which would be very common for government websites. We all know what government websites are like. Speaking of what government websites are like, if you decide that you actually want to go and look at your tax records, etc., on the Internal Revenue website now, apparently if you want to access the Internal Revenue website, they want a selfie and a driver's license if you want to open a new account. This is for our own good. This is for security, to make sure that nobody can just happen to hack in and steal your information and go through your tax records and steal your identity. So instead of you having a difficult password and two-factor authentication, you now have to give them your face, your social security number, your address, your driver's license, and everything else, all in nice one convenient little package that any hacker can steal. So they'll really be able to scalp all your identity a whole lot easier. This is, of course, a wonderful idea.
For our own good.
We all know that this is for our own good. And I will be very, very happy to give them a selfie if I ever decide to use their website, which I never will do, because I would rather download the paper forms, print them out, mail them in on paper. because that's the only way to keep any reasonable relationship with the federal government at this point, is to keep them on the other end of a very, very long trail of actual physical paper. This whole electronic thing can be damned as far as I'm concerned. That includes emails. Oh, and that also includes calling their phone lines where the average wait time is now about 4.5 hours. So I wouldn't bother with that either. But good luck. I personally will never take a selfie and give it to anyone because, quite frankly, I don't want the whole world seeing my wrinkles. And giving the federal government a selfie is a great way to guarantee that the entire world will see my wrinkles. So, that's the way it is. Now, we got another interesting article here about safe havens from inflation. I'm just waiting for it to load. Because, as you know, there are still persistent shortages happening here, there, and everywhere. And there are apparently various freedom convoys happening here, there, and everywhere, and various demonstrations concerning certain types of inoculations and the paperwork associated with them happening here, there, and everywhere. And it's messing up cross-border trucking from both Mexico and Canada. Between the two, I would say the Canadians are probably going to be worse off than the Mexicans on this one. But safe havens from inflation are in shortage too. The recent sell-off in stocks makes many investors more than a little nervous, particularly when they lack broad diversification. Americans who only own conventional assets such as stocks and bonds have had a great run. Now many are thinking about when to cash out and which assets will be best to hold as they hunker down. Thus far, the investor flight to safety has been modest, but portfolio de-risking is now set to grow. Many Americans can smell something rotten in the financial markets, but have yet to take action. If investor sentiment deteriorates much further, the modest flight to safety could become a mass migration. Demand for safe haven assets will be on the rise. The problem is there isn't going to be much supply. Times have changed, and the fundamentals which underpin certain tried and true asset classes have shifted. Consider what makes an asset safe. It should be easy to buy and sell. It's important to be able to get out of the investment without delay and without needing to settle for less than it's worth. It should be useful. It can be utilized by big portions of the population, remain permanently in demand. The most reliable assets are scarce, which right now would be canned air in Helena, Montana. We're having some shipped to us by my son. Thanks, Ryan. If oversupply can swamp demand for an asset, its price can collapse. The asset doesn't deteriorate. Time should not diminish its utility. No, I would say that having partially consumable assets is a good thing in that case. Lastly, it should not be too expensive relative to alternative safe haven assets. Consider how the Federal Reserve note dollar, U.S. Treasuries, and real estate stack up when applying to the factors above. These traditional safe haven assets don't look nearly as safe as they have in times past. The greenback remains king in terms of liquidity. Nothing is simpler to get into or out of, and fiat money is, of course, incredibly useful, right up until the confidence underpinning the value fails. There's little else positive to say. Dollars are anything but scarce in this age of central banking gone mad. Our fiat currency's value has been in constant decline since officials reneged on the promise to redeem it in gold. Alarm bells are starting to ring with price inflation now at 40-year highs. Unchecked inflation means any alternative to the dollar, whether gold or candy bars, looks valuable. Actually, at the moment, certain varieties of candy bars are quite valuable because you can't get them in many parts of the country. U.S. Treasuries aren't also what they used to be. Like dollars, the problem isn't that they're hard to buy or sell. The problem is vast oversupply. Government debt has exploded over the past 2 decades. At the same time, bond yields remain near multi-generational lows. This is only possible because the Fed and other central banks around the world buy treasuries in outrageous quantities, completely without regard for yield. Buying bonds at prices near all-time highs with yields at just a fraction of the current inflation rate all but guarantees losses. Anyone looking for safety should make a hard pass. Real estate is much more difficult to buy and sell than paper assets or physical metal, but real estate is a tangible asset which offers permanent utility. The supply is, of course, fixed. While real estate will almost certainly perform better as a safe haven than treasuries or cash in the years ahead, there's real concern over real estate's relative value. Now, a lot of people are expecting that the real estate bubble going on right now is going to burst shortly after the stock market bubble going on right now. So, this is a good time to have something around so you can snap up real estate at that point. As prices continue to push into the stratosphere, affordability is falling. The saving grace has been mortgage rates at or near all-time lows. Central bankers have demonstrated an absolute commitment to keeping interest rates low. However, rampant price inflation could force them to alter course. Americans may also have to face the final reckoning for decades of out-of-control monetary policy. The day may not be too far off. Confidence in Fed officials, the Federal Reserve note, and centrally planned interest rates will fail sooner or later. Precious metals are well positioned in a landscape short on liquid assets, which functions well as a source of value. Insane monetary policy has eroded the fundamentals for many assets, especially those traditionally deemed the most secure. And they are right about that. So this week, we're supposed to get the first of 3 to 5 interest rates hikes. I am not betting on how high or low this interest rate hike will be. I will say that the prevailing attitude on Reddit, the front page of the internet, is that at the most there will be 3 interest rate hikes. They'll be really, really tiny fractions, and that will magically fix inflation. We will go back to the old normal, and by the way, there's nothing really wrong with the supply chain. So that tells you something about the absolute state of the front page of the internet.
And monkeys will fly out my ass. Yeah.
Yeah, and monkeys might fly out my butt. They're more likely to fly out my butt than that one. On the financial side of things, most of the forums that I've been lurking around on, the public attitude is rah-rah, upbeat, and yeah, the few very modest interest rate hikes are going to put paid to this strictly transitory inflation, and there's nothing permanently wrong with the supply chain, et cetera, et cetera. Behind the scenes, they're not nearly so confident. In the supply chain world, they are totally unconfident because as of the moment, we have critical shortages in about 50 critical minerals. We have critical shortages in about 30 critical feedstock chemicals of all kinds for making everything from plastics and resins to other exotic stuff and things as common as household bleach.
Hi, Ariel.
We have long-term shortages coming up in chemical fertilizers and, surprisingly enough, in organic fertilizers. We have long-term shortages coming up in soybeans and corn down in South America. Luckily, we don't import most of that stuff. We export that stuff. But there's a whole lot of long-term shortages that are sitting around and are known in their various industry sectors that are not known to the general public. And the supply chain gurus are pretty much out of options. It is currently the absolute state of the supply chain forums that I poke around in and lurk around in and keep my eyes wide open and don't say a darn word is, yeah, we are pretty much screwed. The only reason we are not mega screwed at the moment is because at the moment we haven't had another natural disaster or another cyber hack of some kind that will make things even worse. But the general consensus of opinion is, yeah, we're screwed. It's just a question of how long we can hold off and hope to come out the other side. As to that whole business of assets, Yeah, Professor Hardrock and I are keeping folding money around because I don't trust banks anyway. Even my local small town bank, it's a bank. I don't trust banks. Yes, we are keeping some junk silver around. And at some point in time, I'm sure an unfortunate accident will happen and our junk silver will be lost in a boating accident. I mean, that's just the way these things go, you know. But while it's here, it's nice to have. We are stockpiling food because, yes, while supply chain shortages of staple groceries are not serious here yet, and they won't get as serious as they will elsewhere, they're still beginning to show. So I want to make sure that we have food in households so that if we have to stop buying it so that other people can get some because they're too stupid to stock it, we can do so. I am not very hopeful that the Fed's interest rate hike this week is going to have much effect on anything. In fact, I'm not very hopeful that we will see much of a good impact on anything after even 2 or 3 interest rate hikes, because I don't think the Fed will do what they have to do to bring it under control. Because if they do what they have to do to bring it under control, the stock market bubble will burst. At some point, they are going to have to stop pumping all our money into the stock market.
It's not even our money at this point. It's
printed
just money.
Yeah, it's just crazy money. It's fake
Helicopter
money. It's casino money. And at some point, they're going to have to stop propping up the market. When they do that, there's going to be a real problem. I mean, there's not going to be any way around it, because if this market actually reflected the financial reality of the companies that are on it in terms of profit and loss, etc., we wouldn't see nearly the numbers that we're seeing there now at all. And the average person does not understand that. The average person on Reddit, the front page of the internet, is still agitating for minimum $15 to $20 an hour minimum wage for everybody. Oh, and free healthcare. And they are up in arms because the federal government is actually going to start enforcing that obscure little law that says if you make over $600 in a year, you have to report it to the feds and pay your Social Security and self-employment tax on it. They're very upset about that because they're now beginning to find out that, yes, that does cover plasma donations. It covers yard sales. It covers car sales. It covers your little side hustle flipping dumpster dive stuff on eBay. It covers your little side hustle with Instacart or Uber or Lyft or Postmates or whoever that you were already supposed to be paying taxes on, and most people do not. Trying to explain to these people that the IRS is just starting to enforce a law that has always been there isn't going too well, because they still firmly believe that the millionaires, the billionaires, and the corporations aren't paying their fair share, and most of them aren't paying anything at all. So I can see their point. It does look very unfair to go after the working poor who are donating plasma so that they can afford to pay the rent and eat at the same time. But it only looks unfair because they have never been told that, yeah, everybody is paying their taxes. Yeah, there are some cases that aren't, like, what's his name? Al something, or, you know, that Reverend Al Sharpton.
Sharpton, huh?
Yes. He's not paying his. I don't think the IRS has gone after him for it either. How bizarre. A lot of these Hollywood stars aren't paying theirs. But for some reason, the IRS doesn't go after them either. But in a way, it makes sense because of that wonderful old rule. Why take 100% from one dude when you can take 0.5% from 10 million dudes? The IRS can quite probably collect more money by taking 1% from all of us including Professor Hardrock, because of the donations that he gets for this channel, than they would get from collecting Al Sharpton's $4.5 million and Alex Baldwin's money and everybody else's money, because the rich have the ability to offshore their money. The poor don't have access to ways to offshore their money. So it's always going to be better for them to get it from us, which still sucks rocks. But at any rate, it is a good idea to keep an eye on the shortages in your area. And if you need canned air for your computers, look around, because it may be missing and you just haven't noticed it's missing yet. We're getting some from Tucson because my son sent it up. He's also sent up fans so I can fix the other laptop. There are too many shortages to list, but the standard advice still applies. This is not a good time to get sick if you plan on getting sick. This is a good time to try to get elective surgery if you happen to need an elective surgery, because several more medical chains and medical consortiums, hospital groups across the country have begun limiting the elective surgery options and outpatient surgery services for non-essential things due to staffing shortages. And those staffing shortages are only going to get worse. The medical supply shortages and drug shortages are also only going to get worse. So if you can schedule your elective surgery for now, it would be a good time to get it, you know? I mean, that's just the way it is. But I will, as soon as that person gets back here.
That person?
Well, he took off without even announcing he was planning to go anywhere, which is like totally uncool, dude. I mean, really, that's just totally uncool. Really. By the way, would you believe he can actually do chin-ups? It's disgusting. It's just so annoying.
Not many. 2.
You can do 2 more than me. Shut up. Ridiculous that you can do chin-ups at your age.
Or sit-ups. Incline sit-ups. She wants to go to the gym 5 days a week, and I'm just going there and mainly pedaling on the bike to increase my aerobic capacity, because among other things, I've got a hernia that needs to be fixed, so I don't really want to be pumping iron right now.
After your hernia is fixed, you're going back to lifting.
Oh my goodness.
Sarcopenia is a thing, dude.
Sarcopenia?
Yes.
What is sarcopenia?
Sarcopenia happens to old coots because it's harder for us to process protein.
Define sarcopenia.
That's where you get those skinny arms and skinny legs
Oh,
and a
okay.
little pot belly, and you look like a goofy chicken.
Not yet.
They're not as big as they used to be.
No, they aren't. I don't work as hard as I used to. But anyhow, so again, for people who came in late, I'll go ahead and do a quick review. Still doing all the smelting tests on the resin, making some progress, no breakthroughs. For the next couple of days, I'll be working more on the spot test to try and do concentrations of gold in the solutions and see if I can't get that refined. I've got a place I can work now that's heated for some stuff, so we shall see how that all works out. And my hernia surgery is scheduled for the 1st of March, so I'll be kind of slowed up a little bit for a couple of weeks there. Not planning on doing a lot of heavy lifting anyhow for a while. We'll see. And but that's what's going on here. Jim's been just kicking back, doing not a heck of a lot. He's not feeling too good this evening, so he decided to stay home. And that's why he's not here, but he is he's watching the stream and commenting. So if you have a question for him, you can certainly ask it. And that's the basic situation. Next couple of days will be mainly the spot test and such, wet chemical lab work. I'll be making videos on that too. And then later back to smelting and seeing what I've got there. We're also looking to get an assay lab to actually run an assay on that resin so we know how much is in it, because we really don't know for sure how much is in it. I have an estimate, but it's got some pretty high error bars. So once we have a more definitive number as to what we're trying to get, we may actually be pretty close. It's within the error bars right now. If they all just kind of went in the same direction. So we shall see what we shall see. That's about it. Anyone got any questions at this point in time? So, I agree with virtually everyone here, it looks like. The situation in Ukraine, looks like it's going to tend to blow up to some extent.
The real question is Taiwan. Oh, that reminds me.
Uh-huh.
An F-35 stealth fighter crashed on one of our aircraft carriers in the South China Sea. 7 were injured. China pointed out we weren't supposed to be there in the first place, but who cares what they say?
Okay. Eva says we had an F-35 crash on a carrier deck and injure 7 people. And something somebody's brought up is there any better time for China to invade Taiwan than when Russia is invading Ukraine? Interesting thought. Now, while Ukraine doesn't have very much direct effect on us over here, if Taiwan gets invaded, that is going to have a dramatic effect because they are so dominant in producing integrated circuits and semiconductors. And I'm not sure, somebody suggested it, but I don't know if it was a government official threatening it, but they said, the thing to do is make sure that if China invades, there's not a single semiconductor factory left in one piece so that they don't get anything, and let them know that, because that would really hurt the Chinese economy too. So life could get a little interesting there. The narrative about a certain pathogen from an undisclosed location seems to be falling apart, and that's creating some interesting societal tensions. Basically, those countries with the most vaccination now also have the highest COVID rates. Fascinating. So that could create an interesting social dynamic that we should all be thinking of. As Eva said, we're doing our best to prepare how we can. We have limited resources and limited space and things like that. One thing that's kind of weird is if we can food, we can't put it like in the trailer or something. It'll freeze and be destroyed. One thing that is nice, though, is if something's on sale, we can usually just put it on the porch in the ice chest, and it'll either freeze or stay refrigerated, no problem. Like right now, it's 31 degrees. We don't need no stinking fridge. I think that's probably a little oversold there, Roberts. But the experts who really understand these things say that the way things have been done is not very good science. Hey, Coulter, how's it going? And so even if it's not anywhere near as serious as you think, Roberts, the experts who are thoroughly knowledgeable about these things are saying it's not going to go that well, even that way. So that'll create a lot of interesting dynamics that we'll have to deal with. This this year is going to be a lot more interesting than most years, I have a feeling. So everyone, be prepared. Well, let's see. Culture movies, Oh, and Lauren also likes to fish and has his ice fishing stuff. So if the fish start biting sometime, he's going to give me a call. Maybe I can get some fishing done too. Yeah, I would agree with most of those, Roberts. Argonaut, you're not missing the show. You're living in the show. Okay. Trust me, it's a whole lot better to watch it than to live it. I've been in that situation once before in my life where it's, where is reality and who took it and why? It was very annoying and rather stressful, but I learned how to kind of go with the flow a lot better. Eva was very helpful in teaching me how to do that. But yeah, it's an interesting situation here. But while we're concerned, I don't think we're stressing too much. That's important, to be able to detach enough that you can evaluate the situation. Alrighty, Chris. Detach from the situation and observe it without getting too emotionally involved in it. Yeah, pretty much minor, Jim. Dustin, my best find as a prospector in terms of a single piece of gold was a little picker I found when I was on Chris Georgie's claims. The most I've ever held in the hand that I had a hand in making was about 40 pounds of gold bars at a mine I was working at. We were delivering them to a refiner. And when it comes to actually direct mining, I think it was 2/3 of an ounce of placer gold from a summer, a couple of months I worked up there near Middle Fork of the Boise River in Idaho. And we were making, we were dredging a hole there. Anyhow. And so that's my stuff. I'm sure that Jim has a whole lot better stories in terms of what he's found, as do I'm sure some of the other people here. The serious thing is, what kind of ore bodies have you found? What can you make it work? Yeah, I understand, Roberts. That's an inefficient way to generate energy, by the way. Now, it would have made a lot more sense if they were saying they were using the 90% of our brains we don't use for computing capacity. That would have made a lot more sense than energy generators. We're extremely inefficient. We're energy consumers. But never expect Hollywood to come up with a good premise when they can make a stupid one. It's like, the movie Top Gun. A lot of the stuff they were doing was just, it made no sense. If you're out there in an F-14 with Phoenix missiles and you got 6, I don't know what Russian planes they were supposed to have, they were F-5s. But anyhow, and they're coming in at 100 miles and they're known hostile, you just lock them up and shoot them down. That's exactly what the F-14 and the Phoenix missile was designed to do. Maximum range 140 miles. If you're closing and they're closing fast, yeah. No, Patrick, he's actually at his place, so it'd be Deb, not Hooters. But anyhow, yeah, he's not feeling too good. Uh, but yeah, let's say it annoys me when they have the ability to have a good plot and just go completely around it somewhere else for no real reason. And say, like in Matrix, if they were using the computing capacity of human minds, that would make a lot more sense, because you're constantly consuming food. Why? Because you consume energy. You use energy. You don't generate. It's like getting cars to make energy. Well, they don't make energy. They use it. So anyhow, uh, da, 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 da. So anyhow, we also had a little discussion earlier on how to evaluate a mining property in terms of costs and everything. Well, that sounds good, Robert. That would be nice, Patrick. It had to be real ice cream with artificial sweetener, though, or Eva wouldn't let me eat it.
Well, somebody has to watch your health. I mean, granted, by the time you finally have the good manners to die, your life insurance will probably buy me a cup of hot chocolate.
Oh, dear. There goes that shooting pain between my shoulder blades again.
Hey, I had to get a zinger in at some point.
Yeah, pretty much.
And for the record, people, I will be devastated when Bear dies. I love him.
I'm sure Terry will be happy to try and console you. Let's see.
I can already guarantee, Bear, if God forbid you died, every male that has ever made flirtatious remarks to me would be running very fast in the other direction.
Good night, Brett. So
We
anyhow,
all know this.
that's where we're at right now. Does anyone have any questions on anything that we can specifically address, or any suggestions? Say on the smelting, we're getting, now that I've got litharge. Oh, Terry says she's consoled. I think I see Terry going, I'll console. Oh yeah, right, Tom. He said he'd be the most devastated. Uh-huh. Yeah. You'd be dancing on my grave, except you don't know how to dance. You'd just be partying next to it. Night, Terry. But anyhow, now that I've got some litharge, I'm reducing it with the resin. That's the only thing in the charges I've been using that can reduce it. So clearly the resin is reducing the litharge. However, the gold is not apparently completely reporting to the lead button. Couple of theories. Number one, it's vaporizing. Take care, John. And if that's the case, we'll have to try some other stuff. How to get it to spread out real nicely? Vibration might be important on that mining, because it'll tend to stream. If you have like a slightly convex surface and you have some vibration, it should fan out like that. Just a real lightly convex surface. That should work. But anyhow, in terms of the smelting, if it's vaporizing, we can maybe improve that by changing the heat profile or something. Maybe put some carbon in there and some more litharge, because the carbon may grab any gold vapor. I suspect it may be going into the slag and not coming out of that. And because one of the things I resmelted the slag and I got a heck of a nice bead out of it. So if it's in the slag, there's a couple of reasons for that. All of them should be readily easy to fix. One of them would be it may not be soluble enough in the lead, so I may need to add some silver, which I have thanks to Prospector Trip, and increase the solubility. That may be all it takes. Just put like 1/10 of a gram of lead in there, and that may solve the problem. I don't know, but I'll keep working on it. And there's no theoretical reason I'm aware of why we shouldn't be able to make it work. So that's, one thing. And the spot test, the test paper seems to work. Oh, by the way, Coulter, I used a little of that gold you gave me to make a high grade aqua regis solution for testing purposes. Possibly, Vincent. Don't know. I suspect it's more the formula of the flux. Like that one I did, I just added like another gram of soda ash to the flux, and bam. I put some more lead in there too, but I mean, I just used metallic lead, and there was a heck of a nice bead there. I got really good recovery. So I suspect it's more of a formula thing, but don't know. Say, we'll figure it out here, and go from there. But I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be able to get pretty darn good recoveries, up above 90%. I'd like to be getting more like 97, 98%, especially if the rest reports to the slag. Then you can then crush the slag up and just throw it in the ore and get the gold back out of it in your next leach cycle. So again, it depends on where the gold is going. Right now, I'm getting 50 to 70% recovery virtually every time, sometimes up there 90% or more. But it's really, yeah, thank you, Coulter. It's really inconsistent. And that leads me to believe that there's some parameters that have not been optimized and stabilized. And it can be things like the heat profile and stuff like that. So we shall just see what we shall see. But I do expect to beat this in the next couple of weeks. It's just incredibly tedious to sit out there and wait for a furnace to heat. Very, very boring. But anyhow, so that's basically what I'm doing. And hopefully I'll have some good results on the solution testing in a couple of days, so the people out there, the gold content is not completely unknown, Ariel. We had solution running into the resin, solution coming out of the resin, and a volume of solution going through the resin. The problem is the volume of solution and the exact weight of the resin are not precisely known. We have the exact weight of the current resin that came out of the cartridge, so I will disagree with that. We do know the weight of the resin that is, although some of the resin had to be removed for flow purposes, and we don't know how much gold went with that. And the flow is estimated from markings on the side of a UBC tote and kind of rounded to the nearest 10 gallons. So you have a rounding error there. There's about a 5% rounding error in the calculation of the weight of the water, and that's could be exacerbated because it has dissolved solids in it. We didn't actually weigh the water, like take 100 milliliters of water and actually weigh it. So there's a number of variables here that are imprecisely defined that we'll see if we can get a good number. If we can get an assayer that can reliably assay the resin, send it off, get an assay, that'll give us that number that we need. And I say, in terms of the general question, if you know how much solution's coming in, what the grade is coming in, what the grade is coming out, you know how much gold was retained by the resin. And when you remove the resin and dry it, you know the weight of the resin, and that gives you, a number. Depending on how carefully you measure all of those quantities, depends on how precisely you can make that estimate. It could be highly precise. It could be a bit sloppy. And at this point, I don't know how sloppy it is. It would be nice to know for sure. I'm getting in the general vicinity. So if all the variables were kind of, on one direction, then I might actually be doing pretty darn good at this point, but I don't know. We shall find out. Even if I was just getting good, consistent results, where every time I did the test, I got the same size bead of gold, that would lead me to believe I'm getting, pretty good recoveries, because otherwise it should be kind of variable. Take care, David. Yeah, it's important to be able to kind of monitor what's going on. And I took enough samples and enough volumes to have a good idea, but not a highly precise idea. And say we shall see. Well, even things like if I'm reusing a crucible, that gives me another variable. Was there something left in from last time? If I don't reuse a crucible, if I use a new crucible, gold can penetrate the crucible, and that gives a different variable. So yes, I could go with a bigger crusher. We have a much bigger crusher. It's just not my design. So it is highly likely it will be easier to simply add a classification circuit to the Stutenroth mill than it would be to completely build a new mill. That's one of the things we'll have to test. I have plenty of ore out at the ranch to test that, though. So that's one of the things later. I mean, right now I've got this getting the gold out of the resin is a critical thing. Once I've got a method for getting the gold out of the resin, then we're likely going to order some more resin, some more Eco Goldex, just to make sure we got plenty for next season. Because as some of you may have noticed, things sometimes don't show up on time anymore. So we'd like to cover our keisters on that one, so that at least the next season we have enough to get through. And I say that's some of the other stuff, but it's not as critical. I say right now I need to define a method of recovering the gold from the resin. And once we've done that, then we'll have essentially every stage of the extraction process proven, and can then go to upsizing the extraction process. I didn't notice that, Jim, but yeah, that would make sense. So anyhow, that's what we're trying to do. That's kind of the priorities right now. Well, it's not just the horsepower, it's the size of the impact zone, classification, things like that. Horsepower is certainly one of the limiting factors. You can't do more than so much to such and such a grind without so much horsepower. The energy requirement is absolutely critical, but also the size of the impact surfaces, the speed of the rotor, classification. For example, mine is kind of self-classifying. So you get that one we did for Jimmy was doing 200 pounds an hour, had an 8-inch wide rotor, and it was getting like 95% passing 60 mesh, the test run we did. And that's, should be perfectly adequate. No, Ariel. How would I use an ultrasonic cleaner in the process? What function would it have? To clean the gold particles so that they would react faster? If so, the grinding circuit itself, the high-speed particle-to-particle interactions in the grinding mill would usually do that. We do know that the extraction speed is pretty good. We're getting 85-90% dissolution in 24 hours of agitation. So by increasing that longer and or adding some other things to give it more time to work, it should be, we should be up in the mid to high 90s in terms of getting the gold from the rock into the solution. I don't know how well an ultrasonic would do that. If it's not actually crushing the particles, then as long as you have what's known as mineral exposure, here we have a highly magnified piece of ore. And this piece of ore is actually only 60 mesh, but it's highly magnified. And sticking to the surface is this gold particle. If this gold particle is sticking there and has some of its exposed, that's called mineral exposure. If you break it loose, that's called mineral liberation. This will obviously dissolve faster, especially if your mineral exposure is more minimal like this, where only half of it or less. It may just have a little point sticking out like this. But as long as there's mineral exposure and the leach solution can get to it, it would dissolve pretty quick. The way you see if your process is working reasonably is you literally run some tests. I have a bottle roll here, and I would take the crushed rock, put it in a bottle. Get one. I got some right here. This is actually a sample of my barren solution. You take the bottle and put it in the roll. You have solution and crushed rock in there, and it rolls. And then after 24 hours, you measure. You have the rock is assayed, so you know how much is in it. And then you know how much solution you put in, how much rock you put in. Then you measure the concentration in solution, which is done at a lab, so it's done precisely. And then you can tell what the recovery is. We're getting good recovery with that. If there was a problem with the recovery, then you would try other things to see what you could do to help with that. For example, crushing to a finer grind would be one of the more common things. The size of the grind is important, but also the size of the gold particles, because the larger gold particles are going to take a lot longer to dissolve. But if the gold particles are much larger, then you may be able to gravity separate them. In our particular case, our gold particles are 80% passing 2000 mesh. They're less than 7 microns across. Very, very small. They don't gravity separate worth a crap. So what it does is dissolve very quickly, but it won't gravity separate. If you had coarser gold, if it was all coarser, then you might just go straight gravity separation. A lot simpler process. In general, a lot cheaper process. If you've got an ore that's fairly rich, and like half of it's gravity separatable and half of it has to be leached, you can do both. There's no law that says you can only do one extraction process on an ore. So depending on the size of the particles and the grind and in mineral exposure, mineral liberation, there's a huge number of options you can use. And the only way you find out what's the best is to actually do testing. If you are really, really smart and you had lots of results, then you might be able to come up with these answers with theoretical stuff. You still confirm it via actual testing. You never assume anything is good. Now, give you an idea. Let's see if we can get it. Okay, this is actual testing that we had done on this ore. These are the actual particles. Those are not just simulations. This was done with a scanning electron microscope. And they grind the ore and then they sieve it to different grinds, to different sizes, mix it with epoxy, let it set, slice it, polish it, and then use a scanning electron microscope. And that allows them to determine to a great extent the chemical composition and what the minerals are and such, and allows them to get a good theoretical idea of what would work. But to give you an idea, what is that? 100 micrometers? 200 micrometers, which is 70 mesh. Okay. So in this picture, that bar there would be a 70 mesh particle. And these are the gold particles on a rock, on a little particle there. This one here, that little bar is about 150 mesh. And again, here's your gold particles there. And this is a rather expensive analysis, costs about $1,000, but it gives us a good idea where the gold is. For example, in this particle, there's your gold particle. This is iron oxide, and this is dolomite. And this one, this is iron oxide here, and that's quartz. So if you were really smart, you could take this and probably do a lot of calculations and come closer to a thorough analysis just by theory. But it still had to be confirmed in practice anyway, so you might as well just go straight to the practice. And to give you an idea, this is 20 microns. 20 microns is 625 mesh. So that bar there is a 625 mesh particle. This is somewhere around 300 mesh, and you can see the gold in that. And it's all iron oxide. So you can see the gold is associated with the iron oxide. And it's very fine. And that gives us a lot of ideas where to start. Yeah, they seem to Goldstream, the AR seemed to do a lot better than the mild steel, that's for sure. Okay, the test with the pictures of gold, that's called TIMA, TIMA analysis. This was done by the Center for Advanced Material Processing in Butte, Montana. And let's see. I forget what TIMA stands for, but it's a scanning electron microscope. And as it's scanning, it's also getting a chemical composition. Mineral characterization of gold ore. Okay. Particle size analysis was conducted by sieving and automated mineralogical analysis conducting by using scanning electron microscopy and energy dispersive X-ray spectroscopy on a Tescan Mira 3 field emission scanning electron microscope using Tescan's integrated mineral analysis software. So that's the TIMA, Tescan integrated mineral analysis. And so that's what it does. It's scanning and analyzing point by point, pixel by pixel. What the heck is that? So that's, what it costs. It was $900 for the analysis and $300 for the sample prep, if I recall correctly. It is not cheap, but because the ore was being very difficult, it was worth finding out what the heck is going on. Where is the gold? What size of the gold? What is it associated with? These are the questions that, if you got a difficult problem, will allow you to come up with likely solutions. Right away, once we realized how fine the gold was, it's like, well, that explains why the gravity separation wasn't working. I knew that the gold didn't want to separate due to some very simple tests I did. I just took the crushed ore, the pulverized ore, stirred it up in a tub of water, waited a minute, and poured off the top third. Okay? And the suspended solids in the top third of the water column had a higher average gold concentration than the ore that I put in there to begin with. That tells you this gold does not want to settle, And that is one of those things that it said this is going to be a problem. So that's why we spent the money to find out what the problem was. Once we figured that out, then the question became, okay, what can we do to dissolve it? That's where we wound up with the Eco Goldex. I'm not sure if, I know that there was a particular night where people were giving suggestions and stuff, and they may have been somebody's suggestion that recommended I look up Eco Goldex or whatever. I might have done it from a search, not sure. And so then I found the Eco Goldex, got some of it, tested it against the ore. Okay. Nothing works on everything. Okay. Ores can vary enormously in their chemical composition and stuff. For example, this has dolomite. If you were to try and use an acid thiourea leach, your acid consumption would go through the roof, neutralizing the dolomite. It would be very expensive. The Eco Goldex is a basic leach, so the dolomite's not a problem. And so that's, again, it gives us ideas, what will probably work, what won't. In Montana, you're not allowed to use cyanide, so that's eliminated from the discussion right off the bat. Yep. And so that's how we got to that point. Once we ascertained that the Eco Goldex would in fact dissolve the gold in a reasonable period of time. Let's see. And I'm going to fold this to hold some confidential information off. See, those graphs are the dissolution amounts and speed under various conditions. And in this case, yeah, I was changing the pH to see what worked the best. And as you can see, the best is the blue line, which had no lime added to adjust the pH. The pH recommended by the manufacturer was actually too high for optimal dissolution of this particular ore. So you always got to check things out and go from there. Melinda, the reason you can't make it float, as in a typical flotation process, the particle size is too small to get it to get into the surface tension of the bubble. It literally just bounces off. There's not enough energy to jam it together and get it to stick. It just bounces off. And it's very, very small. I'm not sure what the smallest particles for flotation are, but they're probably on the order of 10 to 20 times what this stuff, the particles are. And that's just it. The pine sol probably will not make it float. And besides, you're not going to be floating the gold. You'd have to float the iron oxide because that's the larger particles. If you want to try and float the gold particles themselves, you have to crush everything to like 2,000 mesh, which makes talcum powder look really coarse. And the difficulty and expense of crushing rock to 2,000 mesh is truly extraordinary. If you can't break those gold particles away from everything else, then you can't recover them separately. And if you recover them along with the iron particles, then you still have to either leach them or smelt them away from it. And because of the amount of iron versus the amount of gold, smelting would be very inefficient if you were doing just this. Now, if you had smelters around, like they used to have a lot of them in southern Arizona, and they need quartz, they need silica as part of the flux, okay? That's part of the blend of the flux they needed. And so you could take your rock, your quartz, and just sell it to the smelter as is. And they would crush it, sample it, say, okay, there's this much gold in it, and then pay you like 80, 85% of the gold right there, because when they threw it in the smelter, they would get the gold out of it because it would all melt. Melinda, I have been told that this fine of gold, it will not stick together. Okay? It does not behave like regular gold particles, etc.
Geeks said so.
I mean, when the people who spend years and years and years studying stuff say, nope, that's too small, I don't spend a whole lot of time trying to argue with them, especially as I can't break it away from the iron anyway. Because, I mean, I'm getting 95% 60 mesh. Okay. So if I get, this is my 60 mesh particle, and my gold particle is more like this size, how do I float the gold particle away from the iron? It's stuck to it. The way I have to get it is to crush the iron down to where it's about the size of the gold particles. And so, since the gold particles are 80% passing 2,000 mesh, I have to crush this down to 2,000 mesh. I'm not even sure how you would do that. Seriously, that's an extraordinarily fine grind. I say powdered sugar is somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 mesh, you know, but that's, let's say, even if you could float it, first you'd have to crush it to an impossibly small size to get it to float. Okay. Otherwise, you're just winding up with an iron concentrate, which then you still have to dissolve the gold out of. Might as well save the whole process. That's a step that would not do much. How are you measuring the size of your particles, Melinda? Just questioning. They say 2,000 mesh is not even visible under a 10 power hand loop. You'd have to be using, what would that be?
Microscope.
Yeah, but I'm trying to figure out what size. Probably 60 to 100 pounds. I don't doubt it, Melinda. But first, you got to crush rock to 2,000 mesh. How are you going to crush this to talcum powder cheaply? That's the question. Cheaply. I can get the gold out of this for $10 a ton. Okay. Crushing it to 60 mesh. Crushing it to 400 mesh is going to cost me $100 a ton in the crushing. No matter how I separate it after that, I've got $100 a ton sunk in there. A sieve screen, a 2,000 mesh sieve screen. 200 mesh is not terribly unusual. 2,000 mesh is something I've never
It would look like
seen.
a bed sheet.
Yeah, it'd be even finer than that. Let's see.
Yeah, the highest thread count I've ever seen on a bed sheet is 1,500.
Let's see. Advantech USA, standard testing sieve. These are standard testing sieves. And come on, is there a thing here? Well, let's see. Granger has sieves, but it doesn't seem to have a sieve shaker. That's nice to know. Granger has that stuff. Got a bunch of different brands. Men to... Oh, that's a price thing. Wire cloth sieves. Come on, give me a bunch of them here. There we go. There's the pan. Stainless steel sieves. Woven steel, where's the size? 10 mesh. Yeah, it'd be nice if they just give you, there's a 200 mesh. So that's about the finest I've seen. 100 mesh. Doesn't say. I love that. And this is Granger. Standard testing. See, well, let's see. I should have mesh size range 200. Yeah, I don't think I've seen anything under about a 400.
haven't seen anything under
You know?
400, I can tell you that.
Okay, Chris. But I have one rock the size of a football that was 20 pounds. Yeah. Okay. We need to crush on the order of a ton a day. Pot MJ grinder. What is an MJ grinder, Melinda? Pot grinder size. I mean, 2,000 mesh rock is going to float on water by itself, unless you put a little detergent in there to break the tension and then kind of agitate a bit. Looks like melted butter. Yeah, it would. Why is named for rusty shine rocks, and what have rusty shine on? I think he's talking about iron staining, is my guess, Lars. And iron pyrite is usually deposited along with gold. So as it oxidizes, you get iron stain on the rock. But that's not a guarantee there's actually gold there. Yeah, I've seen some stuff that looks like melted butter on my actually it looked more like gold paint. And it was running 600 mesh, Yeah, I say powdered sugar is substantially larger than what I've got. Let's see what
It's
powdered
like
sugar.
7 times larger.
Size of powdered sugar. Let's see. Finely ground sugar. Use my mind. Granulated sugar in a powdered state. Has an anti-caking agent. Approximate use. Snow powder. Icing contains glucose starch. Of course, they never tell you what you're looking for. Sieve. No, particle size. Let's try that.
Yeah, particle size.
Particle size of powdered sugar.
Tiny.
50 microns. Yeah. It says 50 microns. We're dealing with 7. So that would be,
Like I said, about 5 times, more than 5 times.
What is
smaller.
50 microns? 50 microns would be a sieve size of
270 mesh, roughly. About 250 mesh, actually. And we're doing 2,000 mesh. 7. Okay, it's 1/7 the size of powdered sugar. Yeah, I've seen powdered sugar stuff. I can gravity separate that. That's not a problem. 270 mesh, I can gravity separate that all day long. And it would also float. Absolutely. Again, we're talking 50 microns or whatever, as opposed to 7. I'd say again, people with degrees in this stuff say that 7 microns is too small. That's all I know. I don't know about that, Ariel. Haven't heard. Not if it was slightly magnetic. If it was intensely magnetic, you might. Yeah, I say it's, this, all I know is the experts tell me you can't float this stuff. I know I can't gravity it because it will not settle. Some of it will, but not most of it. And this particular, by using leaching, we're getting better than 90% recovery very cheaply without having to superfine grind it or whatever. So that has, it's all about money. You need, how much does it cost you to recover it? What is your recovery percentage? And different ores react differently. I've done several ores that sound somewhat similar to what you've got, Melinda, maybe a little coarser. And I was getting 80% recovery by gravity. Not a problem. I thought, well, I got some pretty hotshot gravity separation equipment. Let me try this stuff. And it laughed at me. Ha ha ha. And that's when life got a little bit unpleasant, because it would have been nice if it would have gravity separated. And we were willing to do flotation tests. But again, they were saying, not going to happen. Especially as we would not be able to float just the gold, because we'd have to crush it so much finer. So that's why a lot of it is just the economics of crushing, because the leach solution works so well, we don't have to crush it that fine to get really good recoveries. If your system's working well, a good flotation system should be getting 95% recovery or something like that. I'm getting basically the same recovery for less cost, and therefore higher profits. That's the whole thing. And that's the difference between hobby scale and professional mining. You're trying to maximize your profit. And to maximize your profit, you want to maximize your throughput, minimize your cost, maximize your recovery. So you want the most through you can per hour or whatever at the lowest cost with the highest recovery. And so it's all these things you're balancing out to get your optimum solution. And it just varies with the ore, and not even just the mine. There's more than one mine where they have different circuits for high grade ore versus low grade ore. Low grade ore goes to the heap leach, high grade ore goes to the mill, because it's worth spending an extra $20 a ton if you recover an extra $100 a ton. It makes sense. But when your total entrained gold value is $20 a ton, it doesn't make any sense to spend $20 a ton to get it out. Not when you can spend $5 a ton on a heap leach and get 60-70% of it. And that's where it gets annoying at times, because you really have to make trade-offs. There is no perfect answer. Say in this case, because of the extraordinarily small size, the obvious, most efficient way of getting the gold is simply dissolve it. If you had your powdered sugar mixed with beach sand, nice clean beach sand, the easiest way to get the sugar out would just be to pour water on it. It's going to dissolve, then then you dry the water up, would be the way you do it with sugar. Because That's the simplest separation. If you had black sand and quartz sand, if it was magnetic black sand, the simplest thing would be a magnetic separation. You know, it just, you have to look at the particular situation and see which makes the most economic sense based on the various parameters. Um, and flotation has been around for quite a while. Leaching has been around for quite a while. Gravity's been around for quite a while, many centuries, millennia actually. And so the basic parameters of these things have been pretty carefully defined because billions and billions of dollars is dependent on these things. And the big companies want to optimize that economics. So, say there's been an enormous amount of knowledge gained in terms of when you have this situation, what's generally the best way to go about it. Flotation is extraordinarily efficient in recovering base metal sulfides from rock. They're generally much larger particles, and the efficiencies are very high. So you don't have to have a super, they usually crush to about 100 mesh. And the recovery by flotation is extremely efficient at that size. And you can even run different flotations by changing the chemical makeup of your slurry. I was at one mine once where they were getting a copper concentrate and a molybdenum concentrate. What they would do is first they'd float it and create a mixed concentrate. Then they would send that concentrate to the next line, change the chemistry a bit by using what they call attractants and suppressants, and selectively float just the molybdenum disulfide and send it one place, and then the copper concentrates went another. And so the copper concentrates basically went to a smelter to be turned into copper, but the molybdenum disulfide, it was already in a condition it could be used with just a little milling to get it even finer and put into grease. You've heard of moly grease? Grease with molybdenum disulfide. It could also be used for alloying steel, chrome moly steel, things like this. And that is, one of the wonderful things about flotation is it is so flexible. You can float phosphate rock. You can do all kinds of stuff with flotation. It is extraordinarily versatile. It is relatively low cost compared to some other things. It lends itself well to extremely high throughputs. At that particular mine, they were crushing about 100,000 tons a day of rock. They had a line of, I think it was 13 mills. They were around 12 feet in diameter and 30 feet long, ball mills. And most of them were running. They'd have like maybe one line out of 12 shut down for maintenance at any one time. And as I say, their standard throughput was 100,000 tons of rock per day at that mill. That's not mined, that's milled. The actual mining rate was several times that, with it going to waste dumps and leach dumps. So I say flotation was almost a world-changing technology when it was introduced, because it could do so much and it could do it so efficiently and at such high throughputs that I say it just changed the way they did a lot of stuff. It was really, really good. But it has its limitations. And I say, according to the people who have spent many, many years studying this stuff in detail that I really don't want to, our particles were just too small. And rather than spend, almost $1,000 on some flotation tests, we just said, let's try the leaching. Boom, it worked good. So I was like, okay, there's a lot less equipment in the leaching circuit. Grinding circuit's about the same. Doesn't make a big difference. The solid liquid recovery is roughly the same. But instead of having a series of flotation tanks with moving parts and a precise chemistry and stuff that you're trying to maintain, you just have a tank stirring a solution, which isn't super critical that you keep it within certain parameters. So especially for a small scale mine, it just makes it a lot simpler and cheaper. And that's why you're absolutely correct, Melinda, that flotation will work on 300, even 500 mesh will probably float, but not 2000 according to the experts. So he's looking at that. You should be able to mail it. Shouldn't be a problem. Do you have my email address? Because you could email me and we could maybe set up the shipment sort of thing. Should be able to just pack some in a, if it fits, it ships, kind of post office envelope or box. And it shouldn't be a problem. Pretty much, Chris. So, anyhow, the you could send me some and I could play some games. Okay, there you go, Melinda. What was it? Coulter at Mining Magnets. He sent me a sample a while back, and I did a little stuff on it. And I'd like to try a little flotation on something, but I say this stuff isn't going to work supposedly, and therefore I'd prefer to just do something that I know will work with the kind of grind sizes I can achieve with the equipment that I have. Ball mills are big and heavy and expensive. The advantage of a ball mill is that the energy cost is about as low as you can get, and they're very reliable if you don't mind spending a whole bunch of money up front and maintaining them on a regular basis. They're, again, extremely efficient, but they're capital intensive and they're not very mobile. The ball mill that would grind that 8-inch mill I made for Jimmy would, I don't know if Chris is still on there. What do you think? 200 pounds an hour, Chris? How big a ball mill would that take? I'm thinking somewhere in the neighborhood of a 3x3 or a 3x4 ball mill with steel liners and a ball charge. You're probably looking somewhere in the neighborhood of half a ton to a ton. And if you were to buy it new, I don't know, $10,000, something like that would be my guess. You take care, Adam. And I say that's the thing. They do make something called an ultrasonic ball mill. Somebody, I forgot who it was earlier, was suggesting this. And basically it's a chamber, usually rubber lined. You put the balls in it, you shake the whole chamber, and the vibration finally pulverizes the ore. And it will do it too. Again, they're more expensive than a conventional ball mill of the same size. That's exactly what I am doing, Goldstream. I was trying to give an example for everyone watching as to why, on a small scale, the impact mill will generally make more sense than a ball mill. It's generally going to be cheaper, a lot lighter, and more portable. It will have higher wear rates and probably a little less energy efficient. But with the amount of expense and difficulty moving it around, generally you need, it makes sense for a small miner. Again, big miners, no, they don't use impact mills. Way too high wear rates, way too inefficient energy wise. When you buy your energy by the megawatt, you want to be efficient. The big mines in Arizona have special deals with the power companies where they get a really good rate, but in the case of a brownout situation, they will shut down to free up a lot of power. And boy, they do not want to do that. Shutting down a mill is, that's a lot. They would generally start by shutting down things like their electric shovels, conveyors, stuff like that. The mill's the last thing they want to shut down. You can do it, but if you, what they call grind out a mill, if you stop feeding it and let it run for a little bit, the wear rate just goes through the roof. It's really bad. So I say it's one of those things they just do not like to do that. But there are a lot of things they can shut down. Their primary crushers, the secondary crushers, conveyors, electric shovels, things like that. They can shut down relatively easily. Just a couple of minutes to get it ready to shut. And most of those big gyratory crushers, I think they can even start them under load if needed, although they prefer not to. They prefer to have them empty when they shut them down. But I think they can even start the big gyratories if they still got stuff in there. Yep. Yeah, that's a good idea, Jeff. Concentrate at first. But yeah, you need to test it, see what works. And don't forget the possibility of a dry washer. If it's placer and if it's dry material, they make some pretty good dry washers too. Check out I Break for Bedrock. You'll see some pretty interesting fine gold they get using just a dry washer. And so that's, if it's damp ground, the dry washer is not going to work too well, But if you can effectively concentrate before packing, yeah, that's usually a good way of doing it. Depends on the size of the gold, Jim. If it's damp ground or if it's really fine gold, yeah. If it's 100 mesh and larger and not in flakes and real dry ground, you might be able to do pretty good with a dry washer. Those guys that I Break for Bed, they show me some interesting stuff, man. I was really impressed with what they were getting. And I mean, I tested the tailings. I got a sample of tailings and hiked it back. And then I had it assayed, 0.02 ounces per ton. There wasn't much in it. I couldn't pan squat out of it. It assayed almost nothing. It's like that dry washer was doing a great job. And some of the gold it was getting was pretty small. So it's something to consider in a situation like that. Yeah, it's better on coarse gold. It's not going to work if the ground is damp. You know, like most of the time, like up here, the ground is going to be damp enough. The fine gold is going to stick to the other stuff, and you're not going to get a separation. You have to use water to break those particles apart. But if it's really dry, what these guys were doing, they were taking it, running it through a little chain mill, and it was actually decomposing bedrock with coarse gold in it. It's the craziest thing I ever seen. But they go and they would just grind it up and throw it through the dry washer. By gosh, if it didn't work, I was shocked. I'd never seen gold that consistently coarse in bedrock before, but it was there. I saw it. Chris can explain how that happens, but apparently that's as I understand it, as you're getting solution depositing gold, and then building up fairly good sized particles. Then if that solution changes, the temperature increases or something to where it's dissolving gold now, it'll dissolve the small particles, but it won't have time to dissolve the big particles before it changes or dries up or whatever. So you can wind up with basically nothing but coarser gold. I mean, it actually had some, a fair amount of pickers in it, but they were getting some fairly fine gold down to, like, as I recall, 50 mesh, 100 mesh, somewhere around there, which I was shocked. But yeah, it has to be really dry, bone dry. Damp, you can't get particle separation. But, that's why you got to look at it. And, you shouldn't just dismiss options out of hand. There should always be a good reason for it. Dry, separate flour on site. The hassle keeping everything clean. I don't know, Jeff. How about you, Jim? I presume it probably does. Don't have the experience to tell you for sure, but I would assume it did. Still there, Jim? Yep. For the same reasons. The viscosity goes up, the specific gravity goes up, all kinds of things change dramatically and just messes you up. Any other questions out there? Yeah, it would make sense. That's one of the things that maybe one of the issues with this smelting is the viscosity of the flux. Small changes in the composition may make significant changes in viscosity, which is potentially preventing the gold particles from being able to settle in the flux. I'd try a gravity separation first, Argonaut. It's mainly a quartz. I'm not sure exactly what the micro structure is, but yeah, magnet. It's a quartz, definitely. It was. Take care, Melinda, and yeah, send me an email, and we'll see if we can get through your stuff. And yeah, it'd be a fun thing to try. I'd like to try pine sol. I actually have some. And let me know what you think will work on it. I'll give it a shot, make a video. Appreciate it. Do I think someone invented gravity lately? No, but there's probably somebody who will claim to have invented gravity lately. Mm-hmm. There are some gravity techniques like tables and stuff that are relatively new, but gravity separations have been around for as long as we got records. I mean, the golden fleece was basically a gravity separation technique. Put your sluice mat out there, just a fleece. And it's also kind of using flotation to the lanolin in the sure. Sounds good, Melinda. As I was saying, the golden fleece thing, the lanolin in the wool acts as an attractant for the gold too. This is one of the things that I was one of the things I was wanting to try is what can you put like in a pan or a sluice or something that'll just snag the gold like mercury would. In the case of that stuff that I break for bedrock was working, that's exactly what was happening. They followed it up a small water course. I mean, small, you can almost touch the sides, steep hillsides. They followed the gold up a small water course, came to a particular spot where it was just a lot of nuggets there. And then, like he said, like 5 feet upstream of that, it just disappeared. So then they looked on the banks, and one bank, there was the gold, and they followed that up, and there was an outcrop of decomposing bedrock that had gold. Cool, Melinda. Yeah, just kind of include exactly what you want me to do, and if you want to put a phone number in there too, so I can call you and check and see whatever, be happy to do that. I'd like to see what happens. But it wasn't a vein, Jeff. It was decomposing bedrock. It was strange. You're welcome, Mining. That's the advantage of the live stream. You can get a whole bunch of people coming in from a whole different directions. But this particular rock didn't have a vein in it. It was kind of mineralized. Thank you, Melinda. But it was not a vein. Again, strange looking stuff. I've never seen anything like it before or since, although Chris says that it's not horribly uncommon there in California. But in my experience, this was a unique thing. I certainly wouldn't have expected that much coarse gold and virtually no fine gold. I mean, we were extracting like 1/10 of an ounce per ton in the dry washer, and the tailings were virtually unassayable. It was that light. Goldstream. And say, so in answer to your question, yes, I have. Jim agrees with Chris. Say, it was unique to my experience, but that's why I try not to tell the rock what it's supposed to do. That's a good way to wind up in a bad spot. I'm going to get a water here just a minute.
Man,
What?
she is so not the asshole. But I'm glad she's having a come to Jesus moment. You are a treasure.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, you mean compared to some others, huh?
You are a treasure. Now let me ask you.
Uh-huh.
If we had a car and I called you and I said, it's on E, do you think I should try to drive a mile to the gas station? And you say, yeah, if you run out of, what would you say, first of all?
I'd say try and get to the nearest gas station. If you don't make it, give me a call. I'll come,
Exactly.
tell you
Okay.
or whatever.
And if I called you
Uh-huh.
because I ran out of gas,
Mm-hmm.
how soon would you be there?
As quick as I could get there.
Even if you had just started a fire in the fireplace?
Can it be left alone?
Well, could you put it out?
I'm sure I could.
Would you tell me to call AAA?
Did you have AAA?
Well, if I did, would you tell me to call AAA?
How far are you from me?
20 minutes?
And how far away is AAA?
Who knows?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, it might be like, see if AAA can get there in 10 minutes. Take care, Goldstream.
Would you call me the B word and say, don't try to blame you for my stupid decisions when I called you and you said you couldn't come get me?
No. I might make fun of you just a little bit. I certainly wouldn't be, rude like that.
Yeah.
That's a good sign, Goldstream. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you script. Now, if this was something you did every week, then I'd consider something. I mean, I had an employee once that loved to bring back the truck with less than a quarter tank of gas. And that particular truck, I had run out of gas once on a quarter tank on the gauge. So, I warned him and he kept doing the same thing. So I told him, look, you bring it back below a quarter of a tank again, I'm going to fine you, I'm going to dock you $25 pay and start a clock ticking, a 6-month clock. If you do it again, it's going to be $50 in that 6 months. If you do it again, it's going to be $100. And after the $25, he never did it again because it was less painful to him to stop and get gas than it was to hand me $25. But no, I mean, if you had a problem, no, I'd be out there. You've seen that before. Okay, any other questions, anybody? And I want to thank Miner Jim for showing up. And I see him answering questions in the chat all the time. Very helpful as usual. It's hard to assay coarse gold, but from the amount we did and the amount they recovered and stuff, it was running better than 1/10 of an ounce to the ton. I'm saying it was all easily freed and dry washed. That was amazing. Around here, in that general area, for example, the oxide zone goes down 100 to 200 feet. Then it goes into the sulfide zone. So it's interesting it would be interesting to sink along the vein and see what it was like at depth. See whether it got richer or poorer. Because a lot of times at the old water table, you can find some pretty rich ore. Because it's been leaching stuff downhill and then redepositing it over the years. It would be kind of cool if we can make this Montana bee last for years and really mind the crap out of it. That would be kind of fun. We shall see what we shall see. Okay, any other questions, anybody? We made it to our usual 4 hours. Hopefully by next week I'll have both a spot test and a formula for the resin. I'm more confident on the spot test at this moment. I hope you're talking me and Eva as opposed to me and Jim, Jeff.
What?
He said, you guys are a neat couple. Okay. Any questions? Going twice. Appreciate all the feedback and everything, everybody. Thanks for showing up, Jim. I saw you did a lot of work on the comments section. I appreciate it. Well, if you keep the face ahead of you cleaned up properly, going straight ahead is fine. Just depends on how high the face is. Thank you, Wolfman. All righty. If nobody has another question, we're going to call it a night, get some sleep, give my voice a rest, give Jim's fingers a rest, get some sleep here. I got a fun day tomorrow, I think. I think in general, yeah, driving ahead is easier and cheaper than sinking. Thank you, Goldstream. All righty. Gonna call it a night. Thanks for showing up, everybody. Thanks for all the help and the interaction. And
Good
happy
night,
prospecting.
everybody.
Happy prospecting and keep it safe out there.